we see a scene of a criminal, and this is the place where our story will unfold. A woman comes to him and says, "Come on, it's time to go to school." After that, we see a scene in a high school where a number of bullies gather to make two people fight each other. They were encouraging them, saying, "Come on, hit each other. Don't pull each other's legs, or I'll hit you. Quickly, start fighting." Meanwhile, there was someone wearing glasses thinking about how he got into this situation. The other person in front of him looked distressed. Then he steps forward and punches the other person in the face. When the audience saw that, they started cheering and saying, "Good, keep hitting him. Aim for his nose." That kid was thinking about how much pain he was feeling and how long this would continue. After a while, the scene shows us how that kid fell to the ground. Then the main person asks, "Who's the winner?" Upon hearing that, some feel happy while others feel sad, probably because they wanted to win their bet on these two. The losers feel sad, while the winner expresses his happiness saying, "I won." Then the main bully stands up and says, "Seriously?" After that, everyone appears throwing trash at the person who was defeated because he lost. The bully approaches him and says, "Do you know you need to become stronger now?" He sticks a paper on him and says, "From now on, you're the punching bag." Then we move to a scene inside the classroom where everything there is useless. Everything happens except studying, and the bullying continues. Someone appears hitting the same boy who became the punching bag. He receives a strong hit, but he's still standing. Then one of those wearing red clothes says, "Your turn is over. Get out." Another person comes and says, "All right, we placed a bet on you." Then he hits him with a knee to the stomach. He falls to his knees but still hasn't fallen. The other sees this and says, "That was close, but you're still here." The person wearing red says as he steps forward, "How slow you are." Then he raises his fist and hits him hard in the stomach, causing food to come out of his mouth. The boy starts vomiting and sits on the ground holding his stomach while the victorious person celebrates, saying, "I won. I'm the first person to make school a place for vomiting." The others start congratulating him. Then someone comes to Yuki and says, "How many times will you disappoint me? Now, get out quickly and give me your wallet." Upon hearing this, he's surprised and says, "What?" He replies, "Of course, because you're the reason we lost, so you have to take responsibility." They take his money, then check his bag and find that most of it contains coupons. He tells him, "This is my lunch money." He gets angry upon hearing that and kicks him in the face. Then Yuki starts thinking, "I can't take any more of this. Violence has ruined my entire life. Why are they punishing me like this?" He thinks about it and doesn't care. He just wants someone to punish them, regardless of who that person is, even if they're a criminal or crazy. At that moment, the classroom door opens, and he asks, "Who entered at this time?" When he turns around, someone comes and hits him with a strong kick. His money and belongings fall, and blood starts coming out of his mouth. He falls to the ground angrily, while Yuki is surprised and sees the rest of the boys gathering around him. After being beaten, he regains consciousness. Everyone is surprised and starts calling his name. His name is Tanka, and the person who hit him was looking at his phone. Tanka talks about him while another person points at him loudly and asks, "Who are you?" This person takes his mobile phone from his pocket and laughs, saying, I'm just a new transfer student here. Nice to meet you." Yuki was also watching him, and the person wearing red was saying, "You're stupid." And at the same time, there was a chair in the place, so he took the chair and threw it directly toward that student, saying, "What do you think? Who are you?" The chair was heading toward him, making Yuki feel worried, and he was warning him, "Watch out." But Aki was fast, as he dodged the chair that was heading toward him, which made him enter a state of confusion. He was saying, "You're stupid, behave better." Meanwhile, Aki came from behind him and hit him hard between his legs, making him fall and start crying. This action surprised the others. After finishing with the two people, Aki started counting 1, 2, 3, 4, a total of 25 points. How does this negotiation look? Sweat started dripping from these teenagers. He was laughing and saying, "Let's see how things work. Get ready to taste the fruits of your sins." Yuki was watching him in amazement, wondering, who is this transfer student? Then the scene was cut to show a scene of a huge building where the same girl who came to talk at the beginning of the episode was talking to everyone saying, "Our project has been approved. This project can reduce repeat crimes." There was someone shouting saying, "This is crazy. There shouldn't be such a ridiculous system." And another person seriously wondering, what are the officials thinking? The girl answered saying, "Teenage criminals are transferred to schools with some problems, and if they can solve these internal problems, their punishment is reduced. This method is known as senior transfer students." Meanwhile, Aki was having some difficulties with his phone, saying, "How do I use the camera? How did I forget that?" When he saw Yuki, he said, "Come, tell me how things work here. Yuki replied, done. Aki tells him, is there anyone else here besides you? Come quickly. Yuki started to panic. He started sweating and thinking, this is definitely someone I should stay away from as much as possible, but he saved me. He went to him and started explaining how to use the camera, saying, press this button to take the picture. Aki thanked him, then said, while you're here, join me. He pulled his hand close to him, and in the next scene, they were taking a selfie together, and Yuki was thinking, this experience is something amazing. Aki said, by the way, what's written on this? Then he pulled out the stuck card and asked him to explain it to him. Yuki said, this happens when you lose in a gambling fight. Aki asked him about fighting gambling, so he told him, the Minata brothers force weak students like me to fight to make money. Then he said, this is totally crazy, but his features changed when he became excited, so he started talking joyfully. And this is amazing. If I place bets on myself and win, will I get the money? With this logic, Yuki became stunned. Aki continued saying, the Minata brothers, right? He started thinking, so I'll get 40 points. Yuki asked, what are these points? To receive a response from Aki, if you hit bad guys, you'll get some points, and each point reduces a day from your sentence. Upon hearing that, Yuki looked surprised and asked, a day from the sentence? Aki said yes. He explained to him, I'm actually a bad person. Then the scene moved to a person with yellow hair sitting with a stick near the school door, who was also one of the Minata brothers. He looked wealthy. At this moment, some people came running toward him calling, we're late for the meeting with Minata Shin. Suddenly Minata got up and hit the red person with his stick saying, you're late, Suzuki. Then he looked at their faces and asked, what happened to your faces? One person told him that a new transfer student did that. One of them explained, that person was very strong. He might be stronger than Minata. Suddenly this person received a strong hit to his face, and Minata asked them to bring this student to him immediately. Yuki tells Aki and points to him that this is the place where students fight, and Aki is surprised. The students gathered shouting, give us a good show, break each other's bones. In that, one of them won, and the person with yellow hair went to him, raised his hand and said, the winner is this curly-haired one. He was breathing with difficulty. Then he looked at him and asked him, are you okay? It looks like your nose is broken and that's very painful. He said, let me fix it for you. He grabbed the person's nose and pressed it hard, making him feel severe pain, which made the others laugh, saying, wow, Regis is really the best. After that he asked him, are you better now? His nose was crooked, which made him cry, and blood was flowing from it, but the others were enjoying it. They laughed and said, this suits you. Congratulations, the plastic surgery was successful. Yuki pointed out, this is very horrible. As they approach, Aki took out his mobile phone and pointed, it looks like this is one of the Minata brothers. Then Aki took out his phone and checked it saying, this is Minata Reggie. He got 10 points. Aki said 10 points isn't too bad. He put his phone in his pocket and told Yuki, if I win, I should get a deal with a hamburger. Upon hearing that, Yuki looked puzzled, and Aki started heading toward the others. Meanwhile, Minata says, okay, who's the next opponent? Aki raises his hand and says, I'll fight. So Minata looks at him in surprise and says, I haven't seen this face before. Suddenly the others shout from behind him saying, Rogo, this is the new transfer student. Aki smiles at them. Upon seeing that, Rogo starts approaching him and says, so it's you. He tells him, all right, you're next. Upon hearing that, he feels great happiness. Then Rogo looks around and says, your opponent will be. Then Aki interrupts him and asks, can I choose someone? Rojo replies, do you want to choose someone yourself to fight? Aki points at him and says, I choose you. Upon hearing that, Rojo is surprised. Seeing this, the others start laughing and saying, look at this new student. He's challenging Rojo. He's dead now. Yuki seemed nervous and anxious because of all this. Rojo says, transfer student, I'm the strongest here. Do you know that? If you didn't know, I've told you now. Then he says, think carefully. Do you still want to fight me after knowing that? Aki replies, I don't care. I'll beat you all equally. Upon hearing that, Rojo gets angry and puts his bucket aside, saying to everyone, bet what you have, and the rules of this match are very simple. It will be a death match. This fight will continue until one of us dies. They then show that everyone started putting their money and talking. Of course, we'll bet on Rojo, because he's the winner. And they fill the bucket with their money. Then he looks at Aki and says, of course, the one who will die here is you. He sees that he has a nice collar, and says, all right, I'll make you my pet. Then he puts something on his hand and feels surprised and says, a brass knuckle. Here, the referee starts the fight, and Rojo advances toward Aki to attack. Aki barely dodges the hit, and someone says, now the transfer student will be able to finish everything. Another says, yes. Risan looks very serious. Then Aki asks, are weapons allowed? Rojo answers, it wasn't mentioned that weapons are forbidden, and there's a rule stating that it's a death match, and the fight will continue until one of us dies. Roho strikes with the brass knuckle in student Aki's stomach, and blood starts coming out of his mouth. Then Roho tries to hit him with his knee, but Aki dodges and people say, "What will happen now?" The transfer student isn't fighting. He's running away. They wonder, "Do you want to run away from here?" It shows Rojo, as he puts his hand on the ground, picks up some dirt and throws it in his eyes, disrupting his vision. Then he delivers a strong punch to his face, and blood starts flowing. Aki notices that he started bleeding, and his blood is splattered on Rojo's bracelet. Aki smiles, and all the people rise in joy, saying, "That was a direct hit." Then someone asks, "What happened? Where did all that confidence you had go?" Another asks, "Do you want to go back to your mother now?" While Yuki shows concern. Rojo says, "It's too late to admit surrender. It's a death match, and it won't end unless one of us dies." Another person starts pitying the transfer student and laughs loudly. While the others laugh, Yuki watches from afar, thinking, "This was really careless." Roho sits close to Aki and asks him, "Tell me, how should you be cooked? Did you really think you could challenge me and then die peacefully without pain? I'll hurt you slowly until I kill you." Then Aki delivers a blow to his head, and Roho bleeds from his head. Then Aki attacks him again from another side. This surprises everyone. Roho is lying on the ground, while Aki stands tall, holding a stone in his hands, and laughs, saying, "That was a good hit." Then he kicks Roho to flip him over and sits on him, saying, "What are you planning to do now?" And he wonders, weapons are allowed, aren't they? And he starts screaming, while Aki laughs and starts hitting with the stone. It seems the faces of the crowd that were laughing have disappeared. Aki never stops, and his screaming and hitting sounds multiply in the place. He hits him repeatedly, until Roho is covered in blood. Roho says in pain, "I surrender. I admit defeat." Upon hearing that, the audience says, "No, Roho is actually admitting defeat here. The transfer student has won." Aki replies, "What are you saying? This is impossible." Then Rojo asks him, "Why?" And Aki approaches him to say, "Because this fight won't stop until one of us dies." Upon hearing that, the crowd is terrified. He approaches him and hits him with another stone. He continues without stopping. People see that and panic and scream, "Enough! Enough! That's enough! You've won! Stop hitting." Another person asks anxiously, "Are you serious about killing him? You fool." And Yuki shows signs of nervousness, saying, "Stop," but Aki has gone out of control. Then Yuki starts screaming, "Please, stop Aki." While Aki was raising the stone to hit again, Aki hears their words a little, and turns to them. Aki feels worried, and says, "Is this show enough?" Then they reply, "Yes, it's enough." So Aki allows himself to let go of Roho, and approaches Yuki saying, "We won," and he puts his hand on Yuki's shoulder in a friendly way. Yuki notices his hand covered in blood and says, "Your hand is full of blood," while Aki talks enthusiastically, "Let's go have some burgers. Don't you remember you promised me?" Yuki looks at him and tells him it's something he said about his victory, and here Aki smiles at him and tells him there's no need to focus on the details, and Yuki yells at him and tells him to wait and look behind him at Roho, who was in pain, as they leave, and he wonders to himself, this is really something terrible, and they leave, and the others show concern about what happened to Rojo, saying, "Something very bad happened to him, we should call the ambulance quickly." Then, they hear the sound of a motorcycle, which makes their hearts pound. When they turn around, they find Rojo's brother who got off his bike and comes to them. One of them went to him and was saying, "Oh, something very bad happened to your brother, and all this is because of the transfer student here." But he didn't listen to his words. Instead, he kicked that student and went to his brother. He was sitting there, smoking his cigarette, looking at his brother's face that had taken the worst beating. His brother tried to talk to him, but he also started kicking his face. Everyone around them was shocked by the sight, and his brother was telling him, "You're weak," meaning that the weak deserve to lose. Then he started saying, "If that's what you're saying, the transfer student is the one who did it," and took out his wallet and pulled out a lot of money and distributed it in the air toward them, saying, "This is my request. Go and search for that transfer student, no matter the cost. Tuver Minade." Then we see a scene in a burger restaurant, where Aki was alone and looking at the menu with great enthusiasm because of seeing so many burgers. The shop worker asks him, "Are you ready to order?" He replies saying, "I want everything." Yuki replies to him, "That will be too much." So he says, "Give me these two and that one too." And the worker smiles and says, "All right." Then Aki comments saying, "You smell like delicious food." After hearing that strange comment, everyone looked at him in surprise while he was laughing well. In the next scene, after taking the order, they were sitting at the table. Aki said, "This looks very good," and started eating. Yuki looked toward him and was thinking, "Look at how he eats the burger." And Aki's reaction was as if he was eating something he had never tried before, and with the way he was fighting, it seemed he was attacking mercilessly and felt that this boy is not normal. Then Yuki remembered his words, "I'm a criminal." To confirm, Yuki asked him, "Are you really a criminal?" and do you have a real criminal record? He answered, yes, so what? Yuki asks him, how are you still in school? Aki replies, some big people want me to fix some problems here. Yuki asks, who are these big people? And Aki says, I have no idea who they are exactly, but they want me to beat up bad people, and if I do that, my sentence will be reduced. Yuki said, alright, what's your sentence? And Aki commented, let me think a little. Then he pointed with his finger at 5 and said, 500 years. Yuki was shocked and said, what? 500 years? He was thinking, because in Japan, the maximum sentence is 30 years, even life imprisonment rarely happens. So Yuki asked him in amazement, what did you do? But Aki said, no, I need to do something strange. After that, Aki said, I have a great idea. I'll dip them in the French fries. And at the same time, he sprayed a can of soda over the sandwich and shouted saying, it's done. This is Aki's special burger. If you add a taste test to it, it will become more delicious. Everyone started being amazed by the sight of the wreckage, and suddenly, the same bullies entered the shop and smashed the glass door with their sticks. Everyone started getting confused when the bullies entered. One of them climbed on the table and Yuki looked at them and said to Aki, oh my god, these are Raju's friends, and Aki expressed regret about his burger falling. Then Yuki said, are you listening to me? And one of the bullies started saying to Aki, you're that transfer student who beat Raju. Don't think for a moment that you'll escape from here. Yuki said that Minato Yuko is the brother of that person you defeated, and he explained that it's better for them to run away, because they won't be able to deal with all these bullies. But one of the bullies punched him in the face, which led to breaking Yuki's nose. One of them said, get lost, loser, and directed his words to Aki and told him, come with us. Aki says, wait, rule. 3 seconds means it's still safe. But the big bully said he can't wait and crushed his burger. Aki screamed as if the world ended, my special burger. Then the bully started asking, what did he say now? Then Aki said, oh no, the burger became dirty. Then the bully said to Aki, if you like that, start licking my shoe. He extends his hands. Then Aki grabbed his foot, saying, get your foot away from me or you'll die. And when he heard those words, the bully started screaming, and Aki broke his foot. Everyone was amazed, and Aki said angrily, how dare you put your foot on Aki's special burger? Then Aki grabbed one of them and hit another, saying, I can't stand this, and hit the third with a kick, saying, anyone who ruins my food won't get away from me. All this made one of the bullies terrified, and when Aki came to deliver a kick, he climbed on the table. Yuki was thinking, how was he able to take down these 3 like this? Aki started collecting his food and commented, dear, I'll help you be calm. Then he looked angrily at one of the bullies and said, all this, and shoved the burger in his mouth, and shoved another burger in another person's mouth too, and even threw garbage in another's mouth, saying, what's your rating of the food? Alright, now take out the money. This test isn't free. And when the bullies started responding, saying, yes sir, Aki went to the waitress again to order a new burger, saying, excuse me, can I get another yummy burger? And he was laughing at her delicious smiles, which looked very nervous. The girl was terrified when she saw all of that. Then the next scene shows us Aki and Yuki walking together, and Aki says, I'm completely full. Thank you for the food. Yuki starts talking to him, saying, you ate all that with their money, and thinks, Aki is really a strange person. Suddenly, that lady comes from behind, breathing heavily, and says, I finally found you. Upon hearing these words, the two turn and look at her, and Aki says, oh, you're Fumi. And Yuki says, wow, who is this? Maybe she's Aki's sister. But at that moment, the lady puts handcuffs on Aki's hand, making him grimace. Yuki, who was watching this, is shocked. The lady says to Aki, I told you I forbade any unauthorized behavior. Aki starts saying, but Yuki said he would give me a meal. After hearing that, Yuki starts saying, yes, that's my fault. Fumi says, let's talk later. Let's go back home. Aki shouts, ah, it hurts. Don't pull me like this. Upon seeing that, Yuki is astonished. Aki says to him, yeah, we'll talk later. What's your name? Yuki says, did you forget my name? My name is Yuki. Aki says, Yuki? Okay, I'll remember it. Alright, see you later. And he starts waving at him with his hand. Then the next scene shows us when evening comes, and Yuki is walking on his way home, thinking, I'm so tired. He remembers how Aki defeated those people, and after remembering that, he starts laughing a little, and begins jumping and singing, saying, today was really fun. Suddenly he bumps into someone on the road and falls to the ground. This person extends his hand and asks if he's okay. So Yuki says, yes, sorry, but when he looks, he sees Ryo. So after seeing Ryo, Yuki becomes anxious, and Ryo says, I found you. Then it shows us the scene at Fumi's house, where Fumi has tied him up, and he's sitting on the couch, saying while banging the spoon on the ladle, is the food cooked? She says to him, you won't get any dinner today. He says, why not? She answers, because you violated the rules, so I imposed a punishment on you. He says, but I worked hard today and didn't do anything wrong. She points her finger at him, saying, you performed unauthorized actions, damaged the restaurant's property, property, and other things too. But she says to him, you should thank me that you're just not getting dinner today. Upon hearing that, Aki puffs up angrily and starts saying, can I take off this collar? She says, no. The collar contains a GPS system through which we can track your location, and if you try to remove it by force, it will explode. Aki starts grumbling, saying, you should tell me about these crazy things beforehand. She says to him, yeah, and another thing, if you go more than 30 meters away from me, it will explode too, so give up on the idea of removing it. He says, no, don't count this day. It was Yuki who said he wanted to give me a meal. After hearing that, Fumi looks at him and says, do you mean that, boy? He says, yes. Fumi says, you shouldn't have asked him for that. He says, no, I didn't, why would I? But she realizes he's lying. She says, well, you won't get breakfast tomorrow either. He says, why not? And falls to the ground saying, really? Fumi says, you should thank me that you're living in my apartment under my supervision. Then she says to him, come, I'll tell you something important. She says, this system sends delinquent teenagers like you as transfer students to a certain school to help them deal with problems inside the school. So you can handle these problems inside the school. This is a special system. If you succeed in it, your sentence will be reduced. But he says, they taught me everything during training. She says to him, you don't want to go back to that place, right? After hearing that, Aki finds himself in a flashback where he stands in front of a rat's corpse. When he remembers that, he says, yes. Fumi says, good, let's make a deal. He asks, what deal? She extends her hand toward him and shows her pinky finger, saying, tomorrow, you'll go and beat those people. And if you do, I'll make you a hamburger steak. Upon hearing that, he gets excited, saying, hamburger steak, really? She says, yes, really. Upon hearing that, he puts his pinky finger with hers and makes the pact, saying, okay, I understand. It's a deal. She says, yes. Upon hearing that, Aki becomes happier. She also looks at him smiling. The next day, it shows us a scene of the school where all the boys arrive, including Aki, who arrives singing, hamburger, today, I'll get a hamburger. Suddenly, he notices something. Many boys have gathered around him, and Rojo cuts off his path, saying, we've been waiting for you for a long time. Aki asks, who are you? He says, I'm Rojo, the boss, and you owe my little brother. After hearing that, Aki starts preparing and says, oh, looks like today is my lucky day. Rojo says to him, why all the rush? I won't fight you. These people will fight you, and they really want to fight you. Do you know them? They came to me begging. Now, all these bully boys stand in front of Aki, among them Yuki, who looks worried, and Aki asks him, what are you doing here, Yuki? In surprise, he says, don't tell me you want to fight too. Upon hearing that, he feels anxious, and Yuki says to himself, sorry, Aki, but I have no other choice. After that, it shows us a scene from 12 hours earlier, where those bullies were hanging children naked on the bridge, and among those children was Yuki too. He dangles under the bridge and suffers a lot, and says to himself, if Rojo hadn't found me, none of this would have happened to me, and thinks that if his hand slips from here, he will die from this height. Rojo says to the others, do you need help, losers? And they start answering yes. Then he says to them, okay, I'll ask you for a favor. They say, yes, we'll do anything. He starts talking about that transfer student. I want you to kill him. Upon hearing this, Yuki feels great surprise. The other starts saying, that transfer student? And the third says, no, if I fight him, I'll die. Rojo hears him and throws his cigarette and starts stepping on that person's hand with his foot, saying, die then, and pushes his hand off the bridge, and he falls directly into the water, screaming. When they see this, the others start getting very scared, and Rojo comes near Yuki and gently puts his foot on his hand, saying, what will you do now? Yuki is so scared that he urinates in his pants. He asks him, tell me, what will you do? Here Yuki thinks, if I show I'm against Rojo Miyanta, I'll definitely die. The story returns to the present. Yuki says, I have no other choice. I'm sorry, Aki, I don't want to die. Rojo raises his hand saying, all right, let's begin. Let's see. Will you be able to kill your miserable friends who are asked to fight with you? Aki stays here without speaking, standing in silence, while the others come toward them screaming with their eyes closed, trying to hit him. But suddenly, Aki throws the first punch at Yuki. His glasses fly in the air and he falls directly. He rolls away, then kicks another in the stomach, punches the third too, and destroys the fourth with an extra hit. Here, he has almost finished beating everyone, and Rojo approaches him and says, transfer student, isn't that boy with glasses your friend? He puts his hand on his hair saying, there's no friend, there's nothing like that. When Yuki hears this, he feels some sadness, and starts saying, "No, you're really very selfish. We ended up sharing a burger together. I really thought we became friends. And you hit me here." Then he starts crying and says, "You let me down, so why did you do that?" Now, when Aki hears this, he says, "Then tell me, why did you try to kill me first?" When Yuki hears this, Yuki finds no answer. He says to him, "If your friend raises his hand against you, do you consider it betrayal? Does that mean you're also a traitor? You actually tried to attack me. That means you betrayed me." Upon hearing that, Yuki starts saying, "Well," then Rojo starts clapping, saying, "You were really interesting. I was about to kill you for what you did to my brother, but now I like you." And he approaches him saying, "Join me." He finds him frowning and says, "No, not at all." Rojo says to him, "I'll give you money, girls, whatever you want, and even good food." Aki asks him, "Food?" Then he thinks for a moment and says, "No, I can't do that." Rojo hears this and is surprised and asks him, "Why?" He says, "Hamburger steak. She promised me she would make that for me." Upon hearing that, both Rojo and Yuki are surprised and say, "What, hamburger steak?" He says, "Yes, the deal was made." He starts approaching him and says, "That's why I can't join you." When he hears that, Rojo is stunned. Then the scene changes and we see Aki facing Rojo in a fight. Rojo says, "All right, let's settle this according to school rules. Now the battle will determine the fate of this matter." Then everyone starts preparing to fight, and someone says, "Rojo will fight against the mysterious transfer student." Rojo says, "The rule is quite simple. If you make your opponent surrender to you, you win." He asks him, "Does that mean this isn't a death match?" He starts saying, "If you die, who will become my student, you bastard?" Aki answers, "Okay." Then both stand ready, and the crowd becomes very excited, saying, "Come on, let's start the fight." When Aki hears this, he quickly moves toward Rojo. He doesn't head toward Rojo exactly, but tries to grab a brick. When people see that, they start saying, "This person is using a brick again. He's really so cheap." He jumps toward Rojo and attacks him, but Rojo dodges the attack in time and hits him on his face. This makes Aki stagger and fall backward, and people start groaning with joy, saying, "Wow, that was fast. I couldn't see it." Blood starts coming out of Aki. People say, "Rojo-san won the National Youth Boxing Championship. No one can beat him in a regular match." Aki wipes the blood from his nose and looks, standing properly in front of his opponent. When he sees that, he says, "Not bad." Rojo moves quickly toward Aki and hits him, but he survives. But Rojo attacks him with a burst of punches, and Aki is busy dodging. And during that, a punch hits him hard, causing another bleed. But Rojo doesn't stop here. He continues and hits his stomach too, making him bleed from his mouth again. When Yuki sees this, he says, "No, is Aki losing now?" People start saying, "Wow." They call to him saying, "Transfer student, what happened? Can't you withstand Rojo-san's speed? Give up, you've already lost." Rojo starts saying, "Come on, don't disappoint me anymore." Aki lifts his face and attacks Rojo, grabbing his leg, and people see that and say, "No, looks like the transfer student is trying to make a maneuver. Let's see what he'll do now." But here, Rojo moves quickly, hits him with his hand and strikes him to the ground, saying, "You can't move. You seem like a smart kid. The leg is the boxer's weak point. And there are people who, when facing a boxer, resort to this move, but a good boxer is always prepared for such a move, so no problem." Here Aki tells him, "It seems you've got it wrong, my dear," and he raises his fist, saying, "This isn't boxing, it's a street fight," and he starts trying to hit his foot. People start shouting, "Ah, you have to watch Rojo." But meanwhile, blood comes out of Aki's hand, and he starts screaming loudly. He lies on the ground, swaying, in pain. Someone wonders, what happened? Why is the transfer student in such pain? Then Rojo starts, leaning on his shoe, tapping, which means his shoe is made of steel, and he says, "Are you crazy? No one can defeat a steel face." Yuki is amazed when Rojo said his shoe is made of steel. Then Rojo starts stepping toward Aki and continues hitting him, talking, "Transfer student, you were right. This isn't boxing. It's a street fight." Then Yuki says, "Is it over now? This is all you'll get when you face Rojo." And in this case, Aki will die, and Yuki is sad. Rojo approaches Aki and says to him, "Your blood is bleeding in a very dangerous way. Do you need a tissue?" He replies while standing, "This is nothing. You said you're the strongest person here, but you're hiding steel plates inside your shoe. You hit like a beginner trainer." He wipes his blood and says to him, "Maybe you think you're not very confident in your boxing, right?" Upon hearing that, the people around them start shouting. Now Rojo gets very angry. Then he says, "What do you want to say? You're dead here." Aki stands in the middle of the arena and starts throwing punches one after another. When Rojo sees this, he's surprised, and people start shouting, "Oh my God." He says he's taken many hits, but now he has learned. And he says, "Yes, I've learned boxing. Now I understand things well." I've memorized your boxing style. Roho smiles as he says, well, this is very interesting. Then he advances quickly and starts throwing punches at him, but he dodges them and wonders, what happened? This isn't right at all. All of this is completely wrong. Let me give you a lesson. And he says, another lesson, and he blocks Aki's punch, then starts teaching him how to stand, how to hold his fist, and how to throw punches supported by simple leg movements. He dodges another punch and says, that was very close. Then Aki says, I was just creating an opportunity. Then he tells him, rotate your body down and strike. And as he says that, he throws a strong punch to his face, causing blood to come out of his nose. Aki regains his stance and says, that's lesson 1 too. Aki started bleeding. He's staggering and leaning. Aki approaches him trying to throw punches, but he doesn't have the strength. He just easily dodges the hits. Seeing this, people start laughing loudly, saying, he can't even throw a punch properly. He's a complete beginner. Then it shows a shot of a punch that almost hit Roho, but he dodges it and hits him with a quick punch to his face, making people feel delighted. While Aki is bleeding, he says, what about that? Time to give up. But when he looks at Aki's face, he's surprised. Aki is smiling, which makes Rojo feel a little scared, and he advances quickly saying, you bastard, and hits him with another punch to his face. But this time he's surprised because Aki succeeded in blocking it. The people around them are amazed. What? He blocked a punch. Then he starts repeating everything he taught him. You have to show your prey, then strike, and rotate your body. Thanks for the lessons. And Rojo starts getting angry and says, that's enough, and advances quickly, using all his strength to hit him, tries to block the punches. He thinks he's very fast, and people are watching, and Rojo starts dodging and Aki sees that he's starting to retreat, but he tells him, this won't affect you. No matter how hard you try, you won't escape. Then he throws another punch. People start being amazed when he manages to break Rojo's defense, and he's surprised because he rotates his body and hits his face with a violent punch. He tells him, this is how things work, and adds, oh, Rojo is slowly standing up, and he starts saying, no, are you kidding? He knocked down Rojo. Who is this person? Who is the transfer student? And Yuki says, in a short time he learned all of Rojo's moves. People continue to be amazed, wondering, what is this student talking about? And Rojo says, you're just… Aki interrupts him here and says, do you mean I'm a criminal? You know I'm a transfer student. Then he grabs Rojo by his hair and says, you're the one who wanted to fight. Don't forget that, and they just want to live their lives at school. Here, Aki says, this is how I'll punish you, just like you do to them. With his hand, he wants to say, why are you doing all this? They're not even your friends. And Aki answers, because I want to be free. Then Aki shouts and says, get ready for the final round. Aki prepares to use a powerful strike that could possibly cause Rojo to lose. Rojo threatens to kill Aki and runs toward him to attack him and throws a punch toward Aki, but Aki dodges it. Then Aki strikes, and Rojo survives. The fight runs between them, and Rojo gets an opportunity. He hits Aki in the face, but Aki blocks the strike with his head and delivers a powerful punch to Rojo's face, and he kicks him in the head, making him fall on his knees. The bully students look sad, while Yuki is happy, and Aki smiles at him with a victory sign. Then the scene changes to a scene in Fuyumi's office. Fuyumi tells us that she managed to improve a low-level school in 2 days. However, we see that there's a lot of damage. Fuyumi gives them the reports. Someone says, I'll count on you for progress. Fuyumi replies, well then, excuse me, and she leaves. After her departure, someone wonders, how did the bureau chief approve a project like this? I still can't accept it. Everyone wonders, who knows what methods Fuyumi is planning. After that, we see Fuyumi returning to her house, saying, I'm home. Someone opens the door for her and says, Fuyumi, look, students from Tokyo Middle School have been arrested with assault charges. According to what the police said, Aki is happy and tells Fuyumi, this is my news. Do I look amazing? Fuyumi says, yes, you did a good job. And he adds, thanks to those you beat up, I got a full 100 points. Then we see Yuki telling Aki, thank you for being at our school. And to correct my mistake, I'll give you a hamburger. Then we see Aki telling Fuyumi that the hamburger was very delicious. After hearing that, Fuyumi becomes a little happy. Aki climbs on the chair and thanks Fuyumi because he got some money and explains that he will buy all the delicious food with it. Fuyumi says, what do you mean? What money are you talking about? Isn't this gambling money? He says, yes, it is. Fuyumi replies that money that comes from gambling is confiscated here. In a sad and surprised tone, Aki asks her, why? Fuyumi says, of course, if you take this money, you'll receive a gambling charge. He says, well, I'm already a criminal. She tells him, don't use the word criminal as you please. And she adds, according to your first day, I think you worked well, and 265 days have passed. So, this means you have 499 years left. There's still a long road ahead of you. He says, no problem. I'll hit many bad people and I'll achieve the points. Fuyumi says, don't let your guard down. The problems at the previous school were easy to identify, but I don't think the next school will be very simple. we can't underestimate it. It's a place where invisible hostility works. And she tells him, it's good to focus on points to defeat Heituken and the villains, but the most important thing is that you have the desire to help others. If you see someone in trouble, you must extend a helping hand at that moment. He says, okay, leave it to me. Fuyumi says, that's good, let's get ready for tomorrow. Go to sleep quickly. Then the next scene shows us Fuyumi in the morning. She asks Aki, did you prepare lunch? Will it really be okay for you to go alone? Aki says, I'm fine, my friend. Stop acting like I'm a child. Fuyumi tells him, check the school location on your phone and go well, okay? And she adds, I forgot to tell you that the school you're returning to today. But he leaves saying, I'm going. He doesn't listen to her words. She says, wait a minute, but he leaves. She says, he's gone. Then we see another scene where Aki is walking in the street trying to see the location and he whispers, is this in the north of Kedar? And suddenly he sees a high school girl whose path has been blocked by a huge man. Suddenly he remembers Fuyumi's talk that he should help anyone who appears to be in trouble. After remembering that, he steps forward and shouts, making their attention turn toward him. Aki says, get away from that girl. The man replies, who are you? Do you know who you're trying to fight with? Go mind your own business. But he kicks the man and starts laughing, which makes the man angry. And he says, this is a start, meaning he's calling him stupid. Then the man attacks, but he backs away at the right time. He remembers Rojo, who taught him how to hit, so he remembers everything he said and succeeds in hitting him at first, but he survives. He thinks, if I hit him now, I'll create an opportunity for myself. Then he rotates the lower part of his body and strikes, and thus succeeds. The man falls to the ground. He feels happy and says, it worked. Then he turns and looks at the girl, and upon seeing her, he starts to feel a little shy. The girl looks very attractive to him at first sight. She tells him, thank you for saving me. Aki replies, no problem. Helping others is natural. She asks him, if you don't mind, can I have your contact information? I'd like to thank you. He feels shy and is also amazed. Then they exchange their phone numbers. As she leaves, she says, thank you very much. I have to go to school now. I'll contact you later. The girl leaves, and Aki remains there in a state of shock, then whispers, I forgot. I also need to go to school. Quickly. Then it shows us that he arrived at school and enters his classroom, where everyone is talking to each other. Suddenly, the teacher enters and asks everyone to be quiet, and tells them that a new student has been transferred to the school. Then she calls Aki, come here, introduce yourself. He steps forward looking nervous and says, my name is Aki, and he wonders, why are there only girls in this school? The girls look at him and talk to each other. Oh my god, he's a transfer student. Isn't this a girls-only school? And he seems to feel a bit embarrassed. One says, no, he looks really cute. Then the girls notice something around his neck and ask, is this some kind of cosplay? After that, one of the girls catches his attention, and she's the same girl that Aki helped on the way. They're both surprised to see each other. He says, could this be fate bringing us together? Then they face each other in surprise. The girl says, you're the one I met this morning. Her friend asks her, do you know him, Kasumi? And she says, when I was going to school, there was a scary man who blocked my way and was trying to harass me, but this person helped me. And upon hearing that, the girls start teasing him and say, oh my god, it seems like this is a strange moment. This might be fate bringing you two together. And the girl gets embarrassed and says to herself, don't say anything that will bring us trouble. But Aki was caught up in the girl's talk, thinking, could our meeting be destined? The teacher says, you can talk later, and Aki has joined us today, and I hope all the girls will be nice to him. And everyone says okay. The teacher says there's an empty seat, you can go and sit there. So he says okay, and goes to that seat and starts trying to talk to the girl who was sitting next to him. He tells her he joined this school today, and it seems he'll be her desk neighbor. He feels happy to meet her, but that girl looks at him a little, then ignores him, and he doesn't like this. He was thinking, she ignored me. How strict she is. I wish I had sat next to that girl. Then lunchtime comes and he says, finally, it's lunchtime. I really hate school. At that moment, the girl approaches him and says, Aki, would you like to have lunch with me? Aki replies, yes, of course. And when she heard that, the girl takes his hand and starts leading him to the school cafeteria, and his face turns red. Then the other girls are seen looking at his lunch and saying, wow, your lunch looks very delicious. Kasumi asks, did your mother prepare it? So he says no, she prepared it. So she asks him, she and who is she? Is she your girlfriend? So he replies, no, she's my older sister. So Kasumi says, oh, so she's your older sister and not your girlfriend. So he says yes. Then she says that's reassuring. Her heart starts to feel happy, and Aki is surprised by her response. Then Kasumi says, we haven't introduced ourselves yet. My name is Kasumi, and I'm the class representative. So he says, class representative, and you look like an honor student. And Kasumi says, if you have any questions, just ask me. And the red-haired girl says, I'm very surprised that a young man was transferred to a girls' school. Then, another one asks him, why did you transfer here? So he says, I came to solve the school's problems. So they're surprised and say, school problems? Then he smiles and says, yes, if there's any bad person here, I'll intervene and stop them. And when they hear this, the girls say, oh, how funny you are, Aki. Then he continues talking and says to Kasumi, has anything strange happened at school? Kasumi says, I don't think I've heard any serious rumors about our school. Then she asks him, did you feel anything strange since you came here? So he says no. So the girl says, well, I think you should enjoy your normal school life. Aki says, what do you mean by school life? So Kasumi says, like going out with friends, studying, joining clubs, or spending time with your girlfriend. So he thinks, how nice she is. Then Kasumi says, there are ketchup stains on your face. Then she starts wiping them with her tissue. So he says, thank you, Kasumi, and thinks, how nice she is, Kasumi. She feels embarrassed here. Then she tells him, I want you to call me Kasumi. When he hears this, he's a bit surprised and thinks, she wants me then to call her by her first name. Then she asks him to try saying it, so he gets embarrassed and says, Kasumi. And when the girls hear that, they start laughing and say, how embarrassing, he's cute. While Aki is enjoying himself with the girls, he thinks, what is this feeling? I don't know, but I feel very happy. While the girl who ignored him stays sitting alone, watching them. Then, the end of school time comes. Aki walks and says, so, in the end, nothing happened here. The school is completely quiet. Did Fuyumi send me to the wrong school? At that moment, a voice comes from behind, Aki, and when he turns around, Kasumi appears and clings to him, and he's amazed, and she asks him, shall we go home together? Do you want to? So he replies, yes, I want to. Then he's seen heading with her and talking about how he beat up the bad people and solved the previous school's problem. So Kasumi says, wow, you're really strong, and I like strong boys. And when he hears this, Aki starts to feel happy. He thinks, it seems I understand. In other words, Kasumi might be trying to tell me that she likes me. I've become popular at school. And she asks him, if one of the scary men comes to you, will you protect me? So he replies, yes, I'll definitely protect you. And when she hears that, she gets happy and starts laughing, while Aki thinks, it seems she really likes me. Maybe this is what people call love. And with evening falling, he returns to his house, puts down his bag and says, I'm home. Fuyumi says, welcome back, and you came back before curfew. Well done, Aki. She asks him about his day, but he's thinking about his feelings. So she says, are you listening to me? So he says there's no problem at school. I mean, seriously, I've decided to give up the idea of being a delinquent transfer student. So Fuyumi is shocked and says, what? So he says, I'm tired of being a delinquent transfer student. I just want to live a normal and happy school life. Fuyumi responds, what are you saying? You have a special condition to stay here. You know that. I won't allow this nonsense of yours. When he hears this, he asks her, why not? Why can't I live a normal life like others? So Fuyumi stays silent for a moment, then tells him, because you're a criminal, and you're only here for this project. If you don't do this, you'll be imprisoned again. And when he hears that, Aki says, okay, I understand. I was wrong. I'll do it. I'll do my job as a delinquent transfer student. However, he feels a bit sad and says to himself, okay, I'll do my job well. Then we move to a scene the next day where he enters his classroom at school and says, seriously, nothing happens here at school. What am I doing here? And he's thinking like this and opens the door and says, good morning. And when he looks, he sees a strange scene. Kasumi and her friends are cutting the hair of the girl who ignored him, and the girl doesn't look happy at all with her cut hair. And Kasumi is smiling and saying, does it look good? She was asking the girl whose hair was cut. In any case, Aki approached them and was wondering in surprise, why did you cut her hair this way? Kasumi responds, don't you know that this hairstyle has become trendy? And Maruko-chan herself said she likes it. Then Kasumi looks at her with an evil look and says to her, I'm right, aren't I? And the girl responds fearfully, yes, you're right. Aki says, aha, if that's the case, I thought you were all bullying this poor girl. And when the girls heard this, they start laughing and told him, what, you're really very funny. And Aki was thinking, of course Kasumi isn't the type who bullies. But Maruko-chan had wounds on her head and wounds and bleeding and was shaking a lot and many drops of sweat were falling from her. But he didn't notice that because his love for Kasumi had taken over his focus. Then time passed at school and the class was coming to an end. The teacher told him, okay, this time you have to do the cleaning work with Maruko. And here, Aki became annoyed and said, why me specifically? After the class ended, they were doing the cleaning, and Maruko-chan looked sad, and Aki was thinking, how embarrassing. Then he asked her, why are you wearing this wig? You got a beautiful hairstyle, didn't you? But she didn't answer. He asked her again, why do you ignore me? I'm curious to know. But she simply answered, is this mockery? After hearing this, Aki felt surprised and said supposedly, girls are happy when someone praises their hair. Even Fuyumi was happy when I praised her hair. And he told her, isn't this hairstyle supposed supposed to be trendy these days, and you wanted this? Then she shouted angrily, I didn't really want to do that. Now, Aki was shocked and asked, why are you angry? She said, I don't want to talk to someone who flatters the likes of them. So he answered her, who are you talking about? And she shouted, all this is happening because of Kasumi, and I'm not alone here. There are other girls suffering because of her. After hearing this, Aki started speaking angrily. What is this nonsense? Do you have proof? So she answered, look at my head, and took out her bag to show him. And when he looked, he was shocked to see that the girls had written something on her head. So he said, what is this? So she answered, it's Kasumi. And he shouted, no, this can't be true. Kasumi is very kind and can't do something like this. I'm sure. Madoka heard this talk and said she's not like that. She does terrible things no one has seen, and couldn't resist. So she shouted in his face and hit him on the cheek, saying, you've only known her for a few days. What do you know about her? Someone like you coming to solve school problems? Don't be arrogant, you conceited one. And at that moment, the glass door opened, and Kasumi entered and saw what happened. She asked, Aki, what happened here? And Maruko-chan started to panic. So Aki told her, she hit me. And when she heard that, she approached her and asked her, why did you do that, Madoka? She put her hand on her shoulder and said, please, apologize to him. So Madoka said in a trembling voice, sorry. Kasumi answered, just look. She apologized. Forgive her. So Aki said, yes, it's okay. Kasumi asked, have you finished cleaning? So Aki replied, yes. So Kasumi said, so let's go home together. Aki was happy and said yes, and they went out of the classroom together, while Madoka stood inside, shaking violently. Then the scene shifts to the evening, and Aki and Kasumi were walking together, and Aki was thinking that they were completely alone, and things felt normal. The smell was nice, and normal life was much better. Then he said out loud, from now on, I'd like to be with you forever. Aki was very shocked, then quickly put his hand on his mouth and said, oh my god, it seems I spoke out loud. Kasumi approached him saying, I want that too. When Aki heard that, he was shocked and asked, oh, Kasumi. Then Kasumi became shy and started saying, Aki, can you come to school early tomorrow at 8? I want to talk to you about something important. He said, yes, of course. Then she asked, do you promise? He answered, yes, I promise. Then they made the agreement together with their pinky fingers and said goodbye to each other while Kasumi was leaving, saying, see you tomorrow. Aki replied, yes. Then she added, wait, and ran toward her to quickly kiss his cheek. Aki remained shocked, then laughed and said goodbye to her and stood holding his cheek, saying, let's get married. At night, Kasumi was walking alone on her way home. Then the big man with the purple shirt appeared in front of her. She looked at him, and in a moment he bowed before her, and we saw many people bowing like him before her. It turned out that Kasumi was the daughter of a gang leader, and these were members of her gang. Then the man with purple hair shouted loudly, thank you very much for your efforts, young lady. In the morning at school, Aki was inside the classroom at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning as agreed with Kasumi, and he was thinking about Kasumi's words when she told him that she also wanted to spend time with him. Aki was telling himself that he wanted to marry her and was imagining them walking together with Kasumi, wearing a white dress and holding his hand with everyone happy for them. And Aki was saying he wanted to have 3 children with her. Meanwhile, he hears someone opening the classroom door. Aki thinks it's Kasumi, but he's surprised that it's Madoka who came to him. Then Aki says to her, what brought you here? I'm waiting for Kasumi. Madoka stays silent and lowers her head. Aki gets upset and yells at her, saying, if you have anything to say, say it now. What are you planning? Are you planning to hit me again? Suddenly, Madoka tells him, I have a crush on you. Here Aki is shocked and says to her, what are you saying? Madoka continues talking and tells him that she's always had a crush on him and wants to go out with him. And Madoka tries to get close to him, but Aki pushes her away from him and says, I can't go out with you because I have a girlfriend named Kasumi. And he opens the classroom door and is surprised here that Kasumi and her friends are filming him with their phones. And Kasumi stands in the middle with a cigarette in her mouth. Here, Aki says, while terrified, he is the one who came to me and tried to harass and seduce me, but I pushed her away from me because I love you. And at this moment, Kasumi laughs at him and told him, this is very sad, and why did you do that? Aki is surprised by her words, and Kasumi approaches him and blows cigarette smoke in his face, and tells him that she video recorded his harassment by Madoka, and that she was preparing to destroy his life. Aki is astonished and amazed, and tells her that this is an inappropriate way of speaking, and tells her that smoking is harmful to her health, and the health of her future children. At this moment, Kasumi grabs him by his shirt and tells him, what do you know about me? We've only been together for a few days. Aki replies to her that this is true, and that we haven't spent a long time together, but this is a big reason to make our love grow. Kasumi laughs at him and says, disgusting. What is this love you're talking about? And her friends around her call him weird and film him with their phones. And Kasumi continues her speech to Aki. You're just a loser. And why are you imagining that you love me and I love you? Aki told her. Because you told me that you want to spend all the time with me. And this means love. Suddenly, Kasumi puts out the cigarette on Aki's head and told him that it's impossible for her to fall in love with a loser like him. Aki is shocked, and Kasumi pushes him away from her and tells him he's a weird person, and her friends laugh at him. Kasumi says, as I thought Aki is very funny. Aki approaches her and hugs her and tells her that it's impossible that he was planning to marry her. But Kasumi hits him with her phone in his face and Aki bleeds, and she tells him, get away from me, your breath smells disgusting. And blood drops fall from Aki's head onto Kasumi's shoe, and she looks at him angrily and tells him that he made her shoe stained with blood, and she directs her words to Madoka and tells her, come closer and lick the blood stains with your mouth. Madoka is shocked, and Kasumi's friends shout at Madoka and tell her lick it, and they film her. And indeed, Madoka bends down and approaches Kasumi's shoe and licks the bloodstains. Kasumi laughs and tells her, how does it taste? Is it delicious? Say it's delicious. And at this moment, Madoka cries. Then Kasumi directs her words toward Aki and tells him, you loser. Aki is surprised and asks her, me? Kasumi tells him yes, you, and asked him to take the hair clipper to cut Madoka's hair, and promised him if he does that she will keep him as her pet. Aki looks at her shocked, and she laughs and says she thinks Madoka won't object to that, and continues, let's cut her hair an additional 5 centimeters. Kasumi's friends laugh and say that 5 centimeters is a lot. Kasumi laughs and says we'll cut her hair until she becomes bald, and they laugh. And here Aki sits and remembers Madoka's words to him when they were cleaning the classroom together, that she didn't want to cut her hair. Then he gets up calling to Kasumi and tells her that everything that happened was just a lie. Kasumi replies to him while laughing, this is obvious. Any person alive will understand that. Aki feels sad and tells her, I understood. Then he extends his hand to take the hair clipper from her. Then Kasumi gives it to him while laughing and tells him good boy. And Aki turns on the hair clipper and Madoka was in front of him sitting on her knees. And Kasumi's friends tell him, hurry, and they were laughing. And Madoka was sitting crying and sad. And suddenly we hear the sound of the hair clipper cutting hair. And we're surprised that Aki ran the hair clipper over Kasumi's head and cut her hair. And Kasumi is shocked, and Aki looks at her with an evil look and says this suits you. This haircut is trendy these days, right? Then we see that Kasumi puts her hand on her head and feels it, and holds some strands of hair in her hand, and looks at her phone to see her hair, and is surprised that Aki shaved a large part of her hair, and screams. Aki says while smiling, isn't this haircut trendy these days? It resembles failed wrestlers. Madoka is shocked by Aki's words, and Kasumi's friends feel shocked, but one of her friends laughs at her, and Kasumi turns to them and asks who laughed just now. One of them says, not me, believe me. Then Kasumi advances and takes the hair clipper from Aki and approaches them, and suddenly hits them in their faces with the clipper, and they bleed and fall to the ground. Then she turns to Aki and Madoka but doesn't see them. Then she screams and says, you won't be able to escape from me, you will see torment. Meanwhile, Madoka was pulling Aki by his hand and they were running away from the school, but Aki told her to let go of his hand. They've become far away from them, now they're safe. Then Madoka apologizes to him because she thought he was a fool. Aki gets angry at her and tells her with difficulty, why are you saying this about me? Madoka tells him he's not stupid, he's a very pure person. Aki tells her that he should apologize to her, and tells her, why didn't you tell them that you don't like to have your hair shaved like this? Madoka replies to him that she can't say anything to them, because there's no girl who can stand up to Kasumi. Aki asks her, why? Madoka tells him, have you heard of the Kujo group? Aki is surprised and tells her who is the Kujo group. Madoka tells him that it's a gang, and Kasumi's father heads this gang and they have very strong influence. And with this power, Kasumi can do whatever she wants at school. Any person she doesn't like or who annoys her, she curses them and does to them whatever cruelty and violence she wants. And my close friend, when she saw that, she tried to confront her and stop her from what she's doing. But one day, Kasumi and her friends gathered against my friend and beat her and forced her to stand on the edge of the school roof and shouted at her to fly, fly. And they were filming her with their phones. And my friend was scared. And suddenly Kasumi hit her from behind and dropped her from the school roof and she fell. And Kasumi was laughing. And I and her friends were in a state of shock from what she did to her. Then she looked at my friend when she fell and laughed and said, oh, Her arm twisted to the other side, so I said to her, "She's not dead, right?" She turned to Kasumi and approached me, and said to me, "What are you talking about?" and laughed. Her friends laughed in terror of her, and I was looking at them in amazement, and she approached me, and pulled me to her, and put her hand in my mouth and forced me to smile, and I wanted to kill a part of me that day because I obeyed her. After that, I pleaded strongly to the teacher, and the teacher told me that she will deal with this, and I thanked her, hoping that something might change, and I was hoping that this would be the end of Kasumi's dictatorship. But the next day when I went to school, I was surprised that the teacher and Kasumi were standing together and laughing, and they say to me, "Good morning," and Kasumi says to the teacher, "I heard that." What did she say again? Suddenly the teacher tells her in a loud voice that I snitched on Kasumi about what she did, and that I want her to stop Kasumi from what she's doing. Then Kasumi approached me and asked me while laughing an evil laugh, "Why did you do that?" and said to me, "Starting from today, you will suffer more and more and you will wish for death." Then we see Madoka telling Aki that since that day, she has been suffering from Kasumi's actions toward her until this day, and she tells Aki that she has no allies, and Madoka was crying. Suddenly Aki said to her, "But now you have allies." Madoka asks him who is he. He tells her, "Me." Madoka is surprised and tells him after knowing all that, "If you stand against Kasumi and confront her, you will end up in tragedy." Aki tells her, "I don't mind, even if I face a Yakuza gang." Madoka asks him in surprise, "What do you mean you don't mind?" Aki looked at her and told her, "Because I'm a criminal." Madoka is surprised. Madoka tells him that he's very funny, and continues her speech that she doesn't know why she believes everything he says. Even if it's you might be able to change things, and she tells Aki that she will go to her house, and Aki says goodbye to her. Then he looks at her silently, and thinks about her words that he might be able to change things. The next morning at school, and in the classroom the teacher asks them if Kasumi is absent today, and she also sees that Madoka is absent. Aki says to himself, "Madoka and Kasumi are absent. They might have caught a cold and didn't come today." Then the teacher says, "Well, today we will learn a new level of," and suddenly a man breaks the classroom door with his foot and enters with a group of men. Aki is surprised and gets up and says to them, "Who are you?" One of them tells him that this classroom will be his grave. In the next scene, a room in a hotel owned by the Kojo group. Kasumi says that Aki is now being beaten and tortured by the group's men, and we see that she has kidnapped Madoka and took a picture of her while she's tied up, and we see that there's a large important man in the room. Then she tells Madoka that after the men return from beating Aki, they will torture Madoka to death. Then she gets up and kicks Madoka in the face, and tells her that she will record everything. Madoka looks at her and feels afraid, and that she has dragged Aki into this because of her. And at this moment, they hear Aki's voice calling for help. So Kasumi laughs and says, "They've arrived now. I'll come open the door for you right away." And Madoka panics, and Kasumi opens the door and says, "Welcome, I've been waiting for you." And suddenly she receives a strong punch to her face, and the wig falls off her head and she falls to the ground. And after that we see someone looking at his phone and looking at Kasumi's level, and we know that Kasumi's point level is 150 points. And Aki says that Kasumi's level is higher than the Minata sisters at the previous school. Madoka is shocked when she sees Aki standing in front of her, unharmed. Aki says, "Sorry, but I want to finish you off, Kasumi." Kasumi looks at him angrily and asks him how he got here. Aki says, "These men in black clothes told me." Kasumi gets upset and tells her, "What exactly do you mean?" And the large man helps her meanwhile. Aki tells her that he told those men he would beat them until they confess your location, and he only needed one punch to the face of one of them for him to tell him your location. Kasumi looks at him amazed and wonders and says, "The elite of the group's men, he took them out alone. How did that happen? Who is this person?" And Aki unties Madoka and tells her that he thought she caught a cold, so that's why she didn't come to school today. Madoka looks at him silently and tells him, "You saved me." Suddenly Kasumi yells and screams and tells him, "Don't mess with me. I'm the daughter of the head of the Kojo group. Do you think I'll die in a place like this?" And she calls the large man and tells him, "Kill him." The large man stands in front of Aki. Aki tells him, "Back off. The person I want to defeat is Kasumi." The large man tells him, "You bastard. Do you think you can touch Lady Kasumi and walk away alive?" At this moment, Aki delivers a strong punch to the large man's face, and we see blood falling from the large man's nose, but he remains standing in place and wasn't affected by the punch. Aki says to himself, "What's the problem?" and delivers several punches to the large man, but the man wasn't affected by anything. Then Aki tries to deliver another punch, but the large man grabs Aki and throws him away with one hand. Aki is amazed and says to himself that the large man threw me away with one hand. Kasumi is happy here, and Madoka panics at the same time. Aki stands up and says the large man is very strong. Then the large man grabs Aki's arm and throws him away again. Kasumi tells Aki while standing behind the large man that this man's name is Domoto, and he's a judo genius, and that someone like you, a school student, won't find a chance against him. Suddenly, Aki takes off his clothes and says, I'm not an ordinary school student. I'm a criminal transfer student. The large man is shocked, and Aki tells the large man, Domoto here, to try now to grab him and throw him again, and suddenly Domoto grabs him by the collarbone and throws him away, and Aki is shocked and in pain from this, and Madoka panics, and Kasumi laughs and tells Aki that Tomoto is no ordinary man and that he can lift anything with his fingers, and suddenly, Aki stands in front of them, and they're amazed by him, and Tomoto says, who is this person and how can he stand up every time I throw him as if nothing happened? Tomoto asks him, have you practiced judo before? Aki tells him no, so Tomoto asks him, how can you stand up every time? Aki tells him that his mother always got him used to throwing him everywhere when he was young. Here Madoka feels sorry for Aki. Then Tomoto prepares to attack Aki, and Aki tells him to wait, and Aki delivers a punch to him, but Tomoto grabs Aki's hand and tries to break his arm, and Aki tells him that when he finishes breaking his right arm, he will break his left arm. But suddenly Tomoto receives several punches to the face from Aki, and Aki managed to get away from him. Tomoto is amazed and asks him, how did you do that? And here Tomoto understands that Aki broke his own arm before Tomoto could break it for him, and Kasumi and Madoka are shocked here. Kasumi asks what's with this person, and yells at Tomoto to get rid of him, and Tomoto tells her, yes ma'am, and Tomoto tells her that his right arm is useless now, and heads toward Aki to attack him, but suddenly Aki delivers a strong punch to his face using his right arm, and both Kasumi and Madoka are shocked, and Aki tells him which right arm is useless. It works brutally. Then we see Tomoto lying unconscious on the ground. Kasumi screams at him and tells him, wake up, don't let someone like Aki defeat you with one arm. Tomoto gets up thinking that even by throwing Aki everywhere he can stand up again on his feet, and he might continue fighting even if every bone in his body is broken, and declares his defeat to Aki. Aki is shocked here, and Tomoto extends his hand to shake hands with Aki, and Aki laughs, and says, what's this? A handshake? You're more honest than I thought, big guy. But Aki is shocked that Tomoto extends his hand and grabs Aki by the collarbone, and delivers a strong punch with it, and Aki is in pain and moves away from him, and Tomoto says he was planning to finish him with judo only, but in this world, and with someone with these skills, he must be defeated by other methods, and delivers a kick to Aki in his stomach, and Aki moves away from him, and Tomoto grabs Aki by his arm and throws him away, and he falls on a table and breaks the table. Madoka calls out to Aki while she's worried about him. Kasumi laughs and says that Tomoto is the best person who practices judo and that he knocked Aki out with the knockout blow. Kasumi hears Madoka's voice, then turns to her and tells her, are you crying, Madoka? Oh no, did you hope that Aki would save you? Madoka looks at Aki in shock. Then Kasumi grabs her by the head and tells her, come closer, look at him up close. Were you sure he would defeat Domoto? Did you hope he would save you? But here he is lying in front of you on the ground. There's no hope for you in this life. And meanwhile, Tomoto approaches Aki and says, finally defeated, your loss was written long ago. This man only knows judo, so be careful of this idea. Suddenly, Aki grabs Tomoto's arm, and Tomoto is amazed, and tells him you should be completely unconscious now. Aki smiles and tells him he won't be defeated by someone like him, and Tomoto is amazed, and Aki lifts him up and says, now I can do this move with one hand. Tomoto says he's using his own technique, and Madoka is shocked, and Kasumi screams and says, what is this strength? Aki tells Tomoto that he lost the fight. The moment you realized I don't know judo, your matter was finished. Tomoto thinks and says, is he planning to throw me from the window? Aki says he's planning to throw him from the window with him, and Tomoto is shocked. And Aki says of course that's the plan, and suddenly Aki jumps with Tomoto from the window. Madoka is shocked and calls out to him, but Aki gestures to her while falling in the air with a victory sign and says, I'll be back soon, and they fall into the water, and we see Tomoto lying in the water with a fish in his mouth. Kasumi is amazed, and sees below that there's only Tomoto, and asks where did Aki go? Suddenly she says to herself that she must escape. Madoka attacks her and tells her, I won't let you escape. Kasumi tells her, let me go, and hits her on the head, but Madoka says whatever you do I won't let you go until Aki returns. Suddenly Aki appears in front of them, wet, and he's laughing. Kasumi sits on her knees and begs him to forgive her, but Aki answers no. Kasumi offers him that she will give him a lot of money if he lets her go, but Aki replies no. Then she tries to seduce him, and she was approaching him and was hiding a screwdriver in her other hand, and quickly tried to hit him with the screwdriver, but Aki moved with amazing speed, and delivered a strong punch to her face, and she fell to the ground, and Aki tells her, goodbye. The next day we see reports of the arrest of Kasumi and the men of the Kojo gang, and we see a man talking about how Kasumi Kojo is the daughter of the head of the Kojo gang, and she turned herself in, and confessed to everything she did, and that there are some girls involved in some of Kasumi's crimes, and Fuyumi was listening to the man's opinion on the project. The man says that the result was acknowledged, but doubts still remain about moving forward with the project, so it doesn't become a stigma on the special education office. Then in the next scene we see Fuyumi walking on the street, and there's a man who suddenly appeared and is taking pictures of Fuyumi as she walks. Suddenly Fuyumi hears the sound of pictures being taken, then she attacks this man and twists his arm, but the man tells her, let me go, it's me, it's me. Here Fuyumi looks at him and finds that it's Director Sakai. In the following scene, in a cafeteria, Director Sakai was sitting with Fuyumi, talking to her about the project and that she had solved problems they couldn't handle, and Fuyumi tells him that she's surprised at herself, and that Aki gives us the best unexpected results. Director Sakai looks at his phone and tells her it's an acceptable future. Just pointing at someone gives you knowledge of whether this person is evil or not. Fuyumi replies and tells him that the points are taken from the special education office. Just looking at their faces, they will be identified. The director replies that the one collecting these points is the government surveillance program, and Director Sakai continues that surveillance cameras in the streets record citizens' daily lives, and that citizens have no knowledge that these cameras exist, and they don't know about the special education office. And if this project fails, he will bear full responsibility alone, and he continues that everything is going well now, and asks her about the next school that Aki will go to. Fuyumi answers that it's Hoshikyo High School. Sakai is surprised and tells her, isn't this the school with the best students in Japan? Fuyumi replies that there are some rumors about this school, and they worry her. Meanwhile, we see Madoka standing with Aki after he was treated for his injury, and asks him if he's really ready to leave. Aki answers yes, and that this is the life of a transfer student, always busy, and she looks at him sadly and says, I understand. Then Aki looks at her in silence, and suddenly he tells her to exchange phone numbers, and Aki tells her, anything happens to you, don't hesitate to call me, and when that time comes, I'll transfer here right away. And Madoka looks at him and smiles with tears in her eyes. Then they say goodbye to each other, and Aki leaves. In the evening, at Fuyumi's apartment, Aki tells Fuyumi that this last school gave me 150 points. If we add the points, it gives us. Then Fuyumi interrupts him and says it gives us 710 points, and that means 2 years reduced from your sentence. And she tells him, keep up the good work at the next school. Aki calls her by name and says he realized something at this last school, that facing people directly is very important, and that he judged only by appearance Kasumi and Madoka, and didn't try to understand them, whether it was Kasumi or Madoka. Fuyumi tells him it's important to think about that. Then asks him what will you do after that. Aki says he will listen properly and think well. Fuyumi smiles and tells him good, and continues that she hopes he applies this properly at the next school. And Aki answers yes, then asks her for food again, and Fuyumi answers, okay. In the morning, we see Aki walking and saying to himself, the school must be right here, and suddenly, he's surprised when he sees 3 students standing in front of the school gate wearing uniforms, and there are badges on their shoulders, and he thinks what are these students doing? Suddenly one of the standing students calls him and asks, what is this hair? Aki is surprised and tells him, my hair? Yes, I mean my mind. I think it's not good, but… And here suddenly, we see the student grab Aki by his hair and pull it, and tell him what is this hair color, and your face looks stupid. Change this hair color. And another student comes and says he hasn't seen him here before, and asks him his class name and student number. Aki tells him he's a transfer student. The student lets go of Aki's hair and pushes him away and says, I don't care if you're a transfer student. Suddenly at this moment Aki throws a strong punch at his face. The rest of the students stand in shock at what Aki did, and Aki says shut up. The student that Aki hit screams at him, blood dripping from his face, and tells him, don't you know who you laid your hands on? Aki tells him, I don't know. And the student screams and says, don't you know what this badge means? We are students of Hoshiko Education School. We eliminate evil and bring hope to the academy. Aki screams and says, so what? I told you I don't know this. The student says angrily that now Aki has broken 3 school rules so far: dyed hair, improper uniform, and assault. Here, Aki says, this isn't dyed hair and I hit you because you started assaulting me. 2 students come from behind Aki and say, no excuses, and prepare to attack him. Aki says to himself, they're surrounding him, and also says that Fuyumi will scold him, but he has to finish these guys off. Then suddenly we hear a young man's voice saying, what's happening here? And this young man approaches them. We see the students start to get nervous when they see this student. Then another student comes and bows his head to him and says, thank you for your work, President. And a student appears, holding a wooden sword in his hand. Aki is surprised when he sees this student. The president student says, rule breaker. Another student replies while pointing at Aki, yes, right after transferring here he breaks 3 school rules. The president student raises his wooden sword, and Aki is surprised by it. And the president student prepares to fight Aki, and suddenly he attacks Aki and knocks him to the ground with his wooden sword, and says justice has been executed. The president student hits him and runs quickly and skillfully, and Aki falls to the ground, and he takes a strand of his hair and smells it, and says there's no dye smell on it. It seems to be his real hair color. Aki, sitting on the ground, replies angrily and says, and that's what I was trying to say. The president student sees the collar around Aki's neck and asks him, what is this collar? Aki says they put it on me, so he asks him to take it off. Aki said I can't. The president student asks him why. Aki turns to him and says, if I take off this collar it will explode. And here the president student looks at him and tells him, I understand, and the rest of the students look in shock. Suddenly, one of the students calls the president student, whose name is Shiba, and tells him while pointing at Aki that this person attacked the disciplinary officer. Shiba says, I bet you thought he was breaking rules, and bothered him. Be careful next time. Then he directs his words to Aki, and tells him, transfer student. Aki tells him his name is Aki. Shiba says, okay Aki, clean your clothes, it's morning assembly, and all your classmates have gone to your class now. And suddenly, he notices that all the students are making a sound together, and Aki looks at them surprised, then looks at Shiba as he's leaving, and says to himself, he doesn't seem like a bad person. And in class, Aki feels tired and says, I'm exhausted this morning. He looks beside him and sees the student who was bothering him at the school gate, the disciplinary officer, and says to himself, I hope he's not with me in the same class. Suddenly, Aki heard a voice coming from the intercom saying, morning assembly. Suddenly, all students make a sound together. Aki panics and says, what? What's happening? Suddenly, the disciplinary officer stands next to him and pulls Aki by his ear and tells him, what are you doing, transfer student? Get up. Stand, then says loudly, Article 1, loudly, all students say at the same time, respecting individual and group human rights, while protecting their freedom and dignity. The intercom says Article 2, students say we strive to eliminate the roots of evil and injustice. Then Aki hears someone say, transfer student, what is Article 3? Aki sweats from tension and says, summon courage, and something like that. The disciplinary officer screams at Aki and tells him, you fool, and grabs his head and slams his head on his seat, and continues, what are you saying? Where is your brain? Then we see Aki sitting listening with displeasure in class with the annoying student behind him, and Aki suddenly feels sleepy. Suddenly the disciplinary officer says justice execution, and hits Aki to wake him up, and Aki wakes up startled. And the disciplinary officer says no sleeping in class, and put a stick inside his clothes, and told him to sit in an upright position at a 90-degree angle, and we hear his voice saying, justice execution. And after time passes, lunchtime finally comes, and we see Aki saying finally lunchtime, and he takes out the lunchbox that Fuyumi prepared for him and says, let's see what Fuyumi prepared for me, and opens the box and sees she cooked him hamburger steak, and Aki is happy. Suddenly, the disciplinary officer comes and swipes Aki's lunchbox in the air. Aki runs quickly and catches it before it falls to the ground and tells him, why did you do that? The disciplinary officer says, because this food is not healthy. You must go to the school cafeteria and eat healthy food. Aki is surprised and says, healthy food? And in the school cafeteria, Aki is shocked when he sees the healthy food and asks, what is this thing? One of the students replies that it's complete food with all the benefits for the body. It's good, healthy food. And suddenly, one of the students puts a juice bottle in Aki's mouth and forces him to drink it, and tells him it's healthy juice beneficial for the body. And after the school day ends, Aki feels very tired and exhausted, and says, what is this school? It has many, many rules. Then while walking, he sees someone assaulting a student. Then he remembers Fuyumi's words that he must help others. Then he intervenes and hits the assaulting boy, then looks at his phone and is shocked when he sees the assaulting boy's power is only 4 points. Then he hears Shiba's voice calling him from behind. Aki quickly turns to him, nervous and scared, and says, you. Shiba asks him, did you do this to this person? Aki is nervous and doesn't know what to tell him, and thinks that now he's going to hit him with his wooden sword. But suddenly, he hears Shiba say, that's amazing. Defeating evil is justice. My first impression of you was bad, but that was a misunderstanding. Aki looks at him surprised by his words, and Shiba continues and extends his hand to shake Aki's hand, and tells him, Aki, would you mind lending me your strength? Come on, let's protect our school together. Aki thinks that protecting the school also means more points, and Fuyumi always tells him to always do the right thing. Aki says, okay, and shakes Shiba's hand, and Shiba is happy hearing Aki's agreement. Then Shiba says it's time for you to go home. Go home now, Aki directly. And Aki says, okay, see you tomorrow. And Aki waves to him and leaves. Then Shiba turns to the person sitting on the ground and says, well, then he hits him with his wooden sword a strong blow, and tells him it's the third time I've disciplined you, you fool who doesn't learn. How many times have I told you? At this moment, the person sitting on the ground cries and fearfully says, stop. Then Shiba hits him a strong blow and his blood splatters on Shiba's face, and Shiba sticks out his tongue and tastes his blood. Continues, I will destroy evil. The next morning, we see Shiba and Aki smiling and beating up some students who were bullying another student. Then Shiba goes to that student and asks him if he's okay and tells him not to worry about anything anymore. The student looks at him in silence. Shiba continues talking and tells the student that as long as he's here, justice will be achieved. The student here becomes happy and thanks Shiba for saving him. Shiba tells him from now on you must try to live under the supervision of the morals committee, because that way the violating students can't touch you again. And the student answers, yes, I will do that. Then Shiba orders 2 other students to take this student to the infirmary, and they say yes sir. Shiba looks at Aki and says, wow, another day of achieving justice. Aki says to himself that his first impression of Shiba, the head of the morals committee, was that he's a bad person, but when he got to know him well, he found him to be a good person. Then Aki looks at his phone and says, I've achieved a discount of 10 additional points. Not bad. Then Shiba comes from behind him and asks him, what's this? Aki tells him hesitantly that when you take pictures of a person like this, you'll know their evil points. Then Shiba interrupts him by taking his phone from him and says that using smartphones inside the school is considered a violation of school rules, and tells him that he'll confiscate it from him. Aki asks him to give it back to him. Shiba walks away from him and tells him that he has to do something necessary and must leave now. Aki yells at him and says, wait. Aki gets angry and thinks about Fuyumi because she'll scold him. In the next scene, in the principal's office, Shiba stands in front of the principal and tells him that the number of rule violations this week is 9. The principal smiles and tells Shiba, well done. Before you came here, the school was one of the most schools in Japan that had harassment and criminal violations, but when you came, we became the most disciplined school in Japan. Shiba thanks him and asks his permission to ask him a question. The principal tells him, go ahead, ask. Shiba asks him, the new transfer student Aki, who exactly is he? The principal looks at him and says he doesn't know all the details about him, and Shiba interrupts him and says, you don't know? Even though you're the one with the highest authority in the school. The principal says yes, and continues his words by saying he thinks this student is an agent from the government. Shiba says, the government? That explains a lot to me. Thank you, Mr. Principal. And now let's talk about the main subject. I came today to present you with a proposal document. The principal responds to him and says, a proposal document? But if it's from you, I'll accept anything. Let me read it. And the principal looks at the document and is shocked by what's written in it. Shiba says he wants from now on I will manage the student's behavior every second, and continues if the Justice Achievement Plan increases, the school will become more committed and disciplined and won't return to violations again. The principal smiles and tells Shiba, don't you think this matter is going too far? You're almost restricting students from their freedom. Then Shiba takes out Aki's phone from his pocket and takes a picture of the principal. The principal is surprised and says, smartphone, what are you doing with it? What are you recording? Then it shows on the phone that the principal has 35 evil points. Shiba is shocked and says, molesting students, you're evil. The principal says in panic, how did you discover that? Shiba says firmly, Mr. Principal, all you have to do now is stamp your approval on the proposal document now. You have nothing else to do, and this is all you do for the school's reputation, and now I will leave. Then, we see Shiba holding Aki's phone in his hand and sees that he needs to enter the secret code to open it. And Shiba understands that anything in the phone needs a secret code, except this application that shows a person's evil points. Shiba says, okay, I'll do anything to achieve what I planned. And in Fuyumi's house, Aki sits with Fuyumi at the dining table, and Fuyumi asks him, is this morals committee good? Aki tells her he thought they were dangerous, but they're doing everything in their power to develop and maintain the school. And Aki also tells her that he wishes they would develop their food too, and Fuyumi understands what he means, and Fuyumi asks him to continue investigating for a longer period. Aki agrees with her and tells her, leave it to me. And the next day, Aki says to himself that, from now on, he has a schedule, checking students' food boxes, eating his own food secretly, without anyone seeing him, beating bad students. Then after that, we see Aki walking next to Shiba, and Aki says, I'm exhausted. Shiba looks at him and thanks him, and tells him that discipline in the school is increasing every day over the day before, and that he's grateful to him. and that he's one step away from turning the school into the ideal school he dreams of. Aki, smiling, tells him of course, and I'm anyway, a criminal transfer student. Shiba is surprised, and at this time, there are two students calling to their friend and telling him hurry up. Their friend comes from behind Aki and Shiba and tells them, don't leave me, I'm coming to you, and comes down from the stairs quickly next to Aki and Shiba looks at him, and suddenly Shiba pushes him with his foot, and the student falls from the stairs and holds his leg in pain. Aki is shocked by Shiba's action. His friends go to him and ask him if he's okay. Aki asks Shiba, what did you do? And Shiba looks at him with an evil look. We see the student who fell from the stairs holding his leg in pain, and Aki asks Shiba, what did you do? And goes down quickly to check on that student, and extends his hand to him and says, come on, can you stand up? Shiba comes from behind Aki and hits him on his shoulder. Aki turns to him in surprise. Shiba tells him, why are you helping the hand of evil? Your hand will become dirty, and he beats the student who fell on the ground. Aki responds to Shiba annoyed and tells him that the student skipped one step of the stairs. Any person could do that. Shiba responds to him, that's right, any person could do that, just like the person who drives a car and crosses the red light of the traffic signal, assuming that no one will see him. He might collide with a person who appears suddenly, or cause a collision with cars that appeared suddenly. And as a result, evil is born. The usual sentence that any person could do that gives evil the breath to appear in this world. Aki looks at him with confusion. Then Shiba looks at the student who fell on the ground, then takes out Aki's phone and takes a picture of him, then notices that this student doesn't have any evil points. Shiba wonders, then says the government's possessions are useless. Aki gets upset and tells Shiba, give me back my phone. Shiba says, didn't I tell you that the phone is a violation of school rules? Aki responds and tells him, since it's like that, why doesn't it violate the rules when you use it? Shiba says, I understand, then throws the phone on the ground and crushes it with his foot. Aki gets upset and yells at Shiba. Shiba smiles and says this is good enough, and Aki goes to look at his phone. Then Shiba says, this school will be born again. The Justice Achievement Plan has begun, and looks at Aki and tells him, be sure that you will look forward to it. Aki looks with displeasure after his phone is broken, and says, I didn't understand that. What is the Justice Achievement Plan? And the next day we see Aki running quickly in the street and saying, I'm very late. I took a lot of time eating breakfast. And continues, if I'm late, Shiba will scold me. What a pain. I can't bear that. And Aki arrives before the scheduled time and finally breathes and feels relieved. Then he looks and is shocked when he sees the morals police beating students and says, what an atmosphere. And at that time, a late student arrives. Suddenly, a member of the morals police delivers a strong blow to his face and tells him, you won't enter. Then he attacks him and sits on top of him and beats him in his face because he was 1 second late, and Aki is shocked by what's happening. Then he sees another one beating a student and choking him because he came to school with a non-compliant uniform, and another one beating a female student because the skirt is short by 2 centimeters, and scolds her to pull it down a little. Then Shiba comes and says, what a sight. Aki looks at him and says, isn't the punishment harsher than before? Shiba responds and tells him, I'm still lenient with them, until now. Then he looks at a female student and calls her, you violated the school rules. Isn't your hair dyed? The student tells him no, I was warned before and I dyed it black now. Aki looks at Shiba and tells him she's not violating the rules now. Isn't that right, Shiba? Shiba leaves him and goes and brings a bucket with water and holds the girl's head and puts it in the bucket and says you might not have dyed it correctly. Aki rushes and tells him, that's enough. Shiba looks at him and says, did you forget what we talked about before? This is the act of justifying evil. Aki looks and says, what am I doing? Is this wrong? No, this isn't wrong. Shiba says, yes, that's right. What you have to do is watch quietly. This is justice. And Aki sees from behind Shiba the morals police beating students violently. Aki says, I don't understand. What is this justice? And at night in Fuyumi's house, we see Aki not eating and was distracted. Fuyumi tells him, Aki, you're not eating. The food will get cold. Aki looks and doesn't speak. Fuyumi asks him, Aki, did something happen at school? Aki with displeasure asks her, Fuyumi, what does justice mean? Fuyumi tells him what's wrong with you. What happened? Aki says, Shiba. He punishes and beats students who do something bad with the motive of achieving justice, and he thinks he's going too far with that, but he's not sure about the truth of the matter. But there's something inside him telling him that there's something wrong. Fuyumi responds to him and says there's no person who will answer this and be satisfied. Good and evil exist inside every person and depend on the person's own actions, and I think justice is just vanity. The truth you believe in is justice. Aki listens to her with interest, and Fuyumi continues and says the criminal transfer student too. This project, Many said this is wrong, but I trust you, Aki, and I'm confident that you will change this school as you did in the previous 2 schools. And Aki remembers Yuki in the first school, when he told him that he's happy that Yuki joined this school, and remembers Madoka when she told him, you can change things. Fuyumi here tells him, you too, Aki, must trust yourself. Trust in the truth you believe in. Aki looks at Fuyumi smiling and tells her, thank you, Fuyumi. And at night, we see Shiba inside the morals committee sitting with a real sword in front of him, and he holds the sword and says with an evil voice everything for achieving justice. In the morning, and at school, there is someone saying loudly, line up in rows, the morning assembly will start now. The head of the ethics committee is on stage, and Shiba climbs onto the stage with his sword. He says loudly, justice, in complete harmony. The students look at him annoyed. Shiba says, Article 1. All the students say together loudly, the fundamentals of respecting individual human rights while protecting their freedom and dignity. Shiba says, Article 2. Opposing injustice and justice, striving to eliminate its root causes. Shiba says, Article 3. Promoting diversity and inclusion to eliminate any violations students face from all kinds of harassment. Shiba says, alright then, today we will begin implementing the Justice Realization Plan, according to the Ethics Committee, and there will be inspection of every student's haircut and clothing measurements. Then Shiba says, while smiling, come on, put your hands together and let's achieve this together. A happy school life, and the elimination of evil. The students look terrified. Suddenly, a voice is heard saying, you, what are you doing? Shiba and the students look toward the source of the voice. We see Aki entering, dragging the head of one of the ethics committee officers. Aki says, Shiba, sorry I'm late. Another person from the ethics committee officers comes and says, you bastard, you're late, and you hit someone from the ethics committee, you just broke 2 school rules. And he attacks Aki wanting to hit him, but Aki hits him first, then sits on top of him, and beats him down. Shiba says to Aki, what exactly does that mean, Aki? You know today is a very important day for the school. Aki replies, hi Shiba, I was late, and hit someone, but what are you going to do about it? Shiba looks at him and says, that's right, normally what you did is a crime, but I won't care about it if you apologize now for what you did. Aki says, just like Fuyumi said. Aki looks at Shiba and says, Shiba, from now on I'm going to defeat you. Shiba is shocked by Aki's words. Aki continues talking and says, of course there are people who are convinced by your actions and see that you're right, but I don't see it that way and I see that you're wrong. So let's put an end to this and see which of us is right. Let's fight. Shiba puts his hand on his head and says, what a shame. I thought that together we could achieve justice together. Alright then. True justice will not be defeated by evil. Shiba raises his sword. Aki looks at him with a wicked look and says, that's what I was talking about. Shiba says, in the name of justice, I will judge you. Aki prepares to fight and says, come at me, man of justice. A female teacher says, that sword is real. Another male teacher replies to her, this school will be ruled by the power of the sword and arm. An ethics police officer suddenly hears them, approaches the teacher and hits him hard in the face, saying, you bastard, there's no side talking without permission. Then looks at the rest of the teachers and says, whether you're a teacher or student, these school rules apply to everyone. Suddenly he receives a hit in his face from Aki, and Aki says, this also applies to you because you talked. The officer looks at him and says, you bastard. And before he attacks Aki, Shiba stops him and says, stop, you are not able to judge him, but he will be judged by me. The officer looks at him in surprise. Shiba says, Aki, you should not add more sins, and points his sword toward Aki. Aki says to him, may I ask a question? Shiba says, and what is your question? Do you confess to your sins? Aki points with his finger and says, that sword is really cool, and looks at the sword admiringly. Shiba says, I can't understand you. You appreciate my sword well, but why do you reject my justice? He swings his sword toward Aki's neck, but Aki dodges it. He swings the sword and tries to hit Aki, and Shiba says, I am here for everyone, to judge everyone. I will eliminate any evil person like you. Aki says while running, wait Shiba. Aki jumps and looks at an umbrella, smiles and says, this one. Then he goes out to Shiba and hits him with the umbrella, and Shiba dodges the hit with his sword. Aki says, this is Aki's sword. Shiba looks at him condescendingly and says, what a way to fight. Aki tells him, shut up. The two prepare to fight. Shiba says, it seems I've been underestimated. Then he shouts the phrase justice / Aki says, what a name. Aki imagines that he wants to cut off his head, but Aki dodges Shiba's sword strike and opens the umbrella in Shiba's face. But Shiba directs a sword strike at Aki and cuts the umbrella in half, and wounds Aki in his stomach. Aki is in pain from the wound and says, "You cut the umbrella and wounded me. What is this sword?" Shiba says, "Any evil must submit to justice." Aki looks at him and says, "Why are you obsessed with rules?" Shiba looks angrily at Aki and says, "Do I need any reason to do the right thing?" Aki says, "That's right, because you go too far." Then Aki pushes him away and runs, takes 2 wooden sticks from the ground and says, "Alright, these are Aki's 2 swords," and jumps in the air and directs a strike at Shiba. Aki cuts the breast pocket of Shiba's jacket, and a picture falls from it. Aki picks it up from the ground and looks at it. Shiba gets angry and says, "Give it to me right now." Aki mockingly says, "Is this yours? Is this yours? Bringing something like this here to school violates the rules, right?" Shiba angrily says to him, "Don't touch this with your dirty fingers." Shiba remembers when he was a small child watching TV and says, "This is my justice badge." Shiba says that when he was a small child, he had no friends and spent most of his time watching anime films when he returned home. Then he met her. We see that he watched The Justice Hero. We see that the Justice Hero achieves justice and eliminates villains with his sword, and says the same phrase that Shiba said, "Justice slash." We see cartoon characters congratulating and thanking the hero for saving them. So from that day on, the Justice Hero became my role model. He was walking down the street saying, "The man of justice came to town." Then he sees a criminal who stole something from a woman in the street and flees. Then this criminal runs near little Shiba and says to him, "Get out of my way, boy, or I'll kill you." Suddenly, little Shiba remembers the Justice Hero achieving justice and eliminating villains. Then little Shiba says, "In the name of justice, I will judge you." Little Shiba directs a strong punch to the criminal's face. The criminal falls to the ground unconscious, and the people around him are shocked. Then we see at school they congratulated Shiba for saving the woman from the criminal and gave him a certificate of appreciation, and he was holding in his hand a picture of the Justice Hero, his role model. We see his friends at school congratulating him, saying that Shiba is truly a justice hero. I was congratulated by the police and became famous at school, and everyone in the class was smiling, and the atmosphere was beautiful. Justice makes people happy. Since that day, I decided that all people in schools and in the city, and this is so I can see all people happy. But one day he heard one of his classmates say, "I heard that Shiba knocked down a criminal again." The other classmate says, "Shiba always tries to help people." Then after that in that class, classmates no longer praised me like before, and I felt this wasn't enough. He looked at the picture of the Justice Hero and said, "I will eliminate evil completely." Then we return to the present time, and Aki looks at the picture of the Justice Hero with Shiba in front of him with his sword, saying, "I understood now what justice means to me, and since that time I wanted to make all schools everywhere look happy, and for this I will cut down evil. To protect everyone's smile, I will fight." Aki is surprised and says, "Smile? What are you talking about? There's no one smiling. Do you know that?" Shiba looks at him in silence. Then he walks toward the students and says, "That's not true. Surely everyone must be grateful to me, right?" Then we see all the students turning their faces away from him in disgust. Shiba sees this, then asks, "Why? This school is without evil. Why are your faces like this?" Aki comes from behind him and puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "Like I said, you think there must be evil, and that the greatest evil in this school is Shiba." Shiba is surprised and says, "Me." Aki says to him, "Of course, everything you do is so that all people will appreciate you. Don't force anyone and bring them into your selfish justice." Shiba screams and says, "I won't allow hearing one word from evil. Give me that picture." Aki prepares and says, "Come and take it. I'll end this with one strike." The two stand ready to fight, and Shiba raises his sword again and says, "Justice slash." Aki attacks him and says, "Let's go." The two approach each other. Shiba directs a strike toward Aki with his sword and hits Aki, and Aki flies in the air from the force of the strike. Shiba says, "Justice always wins." Then we see all the students in a state of shock. Then Shiba says, "We must now continue the morning assembly." Then suddenly Aki appears from behind him smiling and says, "I'm here, man of justice." He directs a strike at him with his sticks and cuts his badge, and it falls to the ground, and Shiba says, "Impossible, my justice." Then we see Shiba fallen on the ground, and Aki standing looking at him, and Shiba asks how. "I hit you, I'm sure." Then we see Aki lift his clothes and cut books fall out. Aki says one sword strike is capable of cutting through books. "I used them as a shield against your sword strike." And Aki continues talking to Shiba, "You haven't cut through a person's body before, so you won't feel the difference between cutting books and cutting a body." Shiba gets up and looks at him and says, "Do you know the difference between them? You're talking as if you know the difference." Aki looks at him sadly. Then we see a knife stained with blood, and we see young Aki walking with his clothes stained with blood, and around him corpses of people he has killed. And Aki says, back in those days, I didn't know the difference between good and evil. I was fighting for food and for survival. Shiba looks at him and says, who are you? Who are you really? Aki looks at him and remembers everything he did in the 2 previous schools and says, I'm a criminal transfer student. Shiba looks at him and understands. Then Shiba walks away. Aki says to him, where are you going? You lost against me, and you have to take responsibility for that. And he asks someone to give him the microphone, and he goes up on stage and says, I use justice to indulge in superiority, but I did terrible things. I'm truly sorry to all of you. The students standing are shocked by his apology, and Aki looks at him. Suddenly the students turn on him and say, you did many bad things and apologizing now in front of us won't forgive what you did to us. Do you think we'll forgive you? Shiba says to them, I don't think I'll receive forgiveness from you, and that's why the Public Morals Committee was dissolved today. Suddenly, one of the students throws a stone and hits his head, and they say that's enough, and they throw stones at Shiba and at the morals officers. Shiba says, do what you want with me, but not the morals officers. They were just following orders. They look at him sadly and say, President, but the students say, shut up. Do you know how we felt all this time? We felt angry, and suddenly, they attack Shiba and start beating him. You thought you were better than the teachers. How's school life without evil? Everything could have been solved if you had just disappeared. And one of the students picks up Shiba's Justice Hero picture. And that student says, is this picture yours? Well, I'm going to do it. Shiba screams at him and says no. The student starts tearing the picture in front of him, but before he tears it completely, Aki comes and grabs the student by his arm and squeezes it so he feels pain and drops the picture from his hand. Then the student holds his arm in pain. Then he asks the rest of the students to get away from Shiba and tells them that Shiba did many bad things, but he also helped you in many things. And anyone who approaches Shiba to hurt him will face me, and I'll finish him off immediately. The students look at each other. Then Aki takes the picture and approaches Shiba and gives it to him. Shiba asks him why. Aki says, you're asking me why. Your eyes asked for help. Shiba looks at him in silence. And I also think we're similar, you and me, you and I. I also committed crimes, but I met someone called Fuimi, who listened to my story, and I realized I was wrong, so I have to do the same with you, to become that person you are now. Shiba looks at him and asks him, do you think I can start over? Aki tells him, depending on you. I don't think so. Shiba looks at him then smiles. Then he gives him the picture and says, I understand. Then we notice there's a girl standing at the school gate watching everything, and she says, so this is Aki, and we see Aki smiling at Shiba. Then we see the girl holding candy in her hand and saying, it looks like the coming days will be full of excitement. Then we hear someone say, Hoshiko School, the most disciplined student school in Japan, was being terrorized by one student's administration, and once again the criminal transfer student played a big role. The one speaking was Principal Sakai. Fuimi looks at him and doesn't speak. Sakai says to her, is there something wrong? Fuimi replies and says, no, about this matter, Principal. The principal says, that case, no problem. Fuimi says, looking at the previous results and taking into consideration the next school, I've made a decision that this is too much for Aki to handle. Then the scene switches to Fuimi's apartment. Fuimi says, come on Aki to dry your hair. Aki replies okay, and we see Fuimi drying Aki's hair, and Fuimi asks him, have your wounds healed now? Aki says, yes, I'm fine now, and he takes off his clothes for her and shows her his wounds and says they don't hurt anymore, and that he recovered well from that strange sword strike. Fuimi says to herself, it's the third time he gets beaten and injured, and recovers quickly, thanks to the criminal transfer student project. The schools he went to stated they're improving amazingly, and this is a good thing. And better than that is Aki's condition, improving and making him feel his worth. And he's become happy now. But, suddenly, Aki turns to her and asks her, what's the next school? Fuimi looks shocked, and Aki says while putting on his clothes, I defeated many bad people in the previous schools, and I think I'm capable of stopping many bad people who cause problems. Fuimi tells him hesitantly, I was thinking about many things. Aki looks at her with interest. The next school, there's another person who will go with you. Aki says, another person. He thinks, could this person be Fuimi? Fuimi replies and says, no, not me, but the second transfer student. Aki gets upset when he hears that and says to Fuimi, what do you mean by that? Fuimi says, there's another person who underwent training at the facility, just like you. Aki is shocked and falls to the ground, and says, no, I can handle this by myself. Fuimi firmly says and points with her finger, the next school you'll go with the second transfer student, and don't cause problems or fight with this person. Agreed? Aki looks at her in silence and annoyance. The next morning, Aki arrives at the school and looks at his phone and says, this should be the place, and says, I've arrived, and also says, well, who is this second criminal transfer student? And we find a child asking his mother, who is this person, and he was pointing at Aki. And Aki says, I'm here, I don't need anyone else. Meanwhile, he hears someone's voice saying, Miss, How much? And he was walking behind the girl we saw watching Aki at the previous school gate. Then we see this man saying to the girl, "Girl, don't ignore me. I'm talking to you." And the girl was looking at her phone and didn't respond to the man. Then the man bothers her again with words. And also, the girl didn't talk to him, as if this man doesn't exist. Then the man looks at her angrily and extends his hand and grabs her by the shoulder and says, "I'm talking to you, girl. Didn't you hear me?" Then the girl responds while looking at her phone, "Sorry, old bald man. There's someone else waiting for me." Aki hears the man say, "Girl, I'm not bald and not old." And he kept bothering the girl with ugly words. Suddenly, the girl turns to him and raises her leg and strikes him with a surprise hit to the face. So the man flies and falls into the fountain water. And the girl tells him, "Take a bath to clean yourself, you old bald man." Aki watches that and shows his admiration for this girl. Then the girl looks at him and says, "Nice quick look. Isn't that right, Aki?" At this moment, Aki is surprised and says, "How did you know my name?" The girl tells him, "Well, I'm Yukibi. Just like you, I'm a criminal transfer student." Aki screams and says, "You?" Yukibi replies and says, "Didn't they tell you yet?" Aki says, "Fuimi didn't tell me that the other transfer student is a girl." Then Yukibi approaches and touches his collar, while Aki is shocked. Then suddenly she ties a rope to it, then says, "We're done introducing ourselves to each other. Let's go." Then she pulls Aki by his neck, and continues saying, "Let's go so we won't be late to our school." And, at school, in class the teacher introduces Aki and Yukibi to the rest of the students, and says, "This is Aki, and this is Yukibi, students who transferred to our school. Welcome them." Aki says, "Hello everyone. I'm Aki." Yukibi says, "I'm happy to meet you. I'm Yukibi." Then she says, "I'll be grateful if you're friendly with me." The male students look at her with love, and one of the students says, "Yukibi looks like an angel." And the teacher tells them there are empty seats over there. Aki says, while upset, the seats are next to each other. Yukibi says, "Are you saying something, Aki?" After that we see Aki walking with Yukibi, and Yukibi tells him, "Aki, at this school you don't need to do anything. Just make sure you don't get in my way." Aki gets angry and says to her, "What's your problem?" Fuimi said not to get close to others. Then Yukibi leaves him and walks alone. Aki gets angry and yells at her and says, "Don't ignore me." The scene changes to the classroom, and we see Aki going to his seat, and Yukibi talks to herself and says, "This transfer student, the criminal Aki. I'm sorry, Fuyumi, but I can't work with him for long." And during break time we learn that transfer students are rare, and having two people at once in the school is something very special. And we see some students approaching Aki and trying to get close to him and get to know him. And they ask him, "What's the story with this collar?" And others ask him to come eat with them. And we see some girls talking to Yukibi and saying they're happy to meet her, and showing their admiration for her clothes, and a girl offers her some candy, and that it's an expression of the beginning of their friendship. Yukibi looks at the piece of candy in silence and extends her hands and takes it from her, and the same girl offers Aki to take candy from her, and Aki is happy about this, and thanks her, and Aki says, "You guys are very nice." And suddenly and without warning, Yukibi slaps Aki on the face with a strong slap, and from the force of the slap, Aki falls to the ground, and the candy also falls to the ground and breaks, and Yukibi gives Aki a sharp look, and the girls are shocked and say, "A fight?" Aki screams and says to Yukibi, "What's your problem?" and looks at the piece of candy. Yukibi laughs and says, "Sorry, there was a bug on your face. Then we also ate some food before so we can have the candy later." A student tells her, of course, anytime this candy is available here. Aki approaches her and says, "What's wrong with you? I want to eat candy." Yukibi grabs Aki by the face and tells him, "Aki, I want to talk to you privately outside." "Excuse us." And outside, Yukibi says, "Aki, what exactly were you trying to do?" Aki doesn't understand and asks her, "What do you mean?" and continues, "I was trying to get close to the students in class." Yukibi looks at him and asks him, "Are you really a criminal transfer student? You're very careless. Didn't you notice that?" Aki gets angry here and tells her he's not careless, and that he's very careful. Yukibi tells him, "Fine. As long as you're like that, why did you do that there in class? Illegal drugs. You were about to eat drugs." Aki is shocked and says, "Drugs?" Then Yukibi explains to him that this candy is originally drugs. "You didn't notice that, Aki." Aki responds to her and says, "Impossible. It looks like regular candy," and continues his words, and says drugs are like medicine or things like that. Yukibi responds to him and says that drugs have different types. Some of them look like candy like this. Aki is shocked and says, "And how did you know that?" Yukibi responds and says, "I used to do like them too." Aki is shocked and tells her, "You're a bad person." Yukibi says, "Yes. And why did I become a criminal transfer student in your opinion? Aren't you like that too?" Aki responds and says, "No, I'm a good person." Yukibi looks at him with annoyance and says, "Your behavior is childish." Aki screams and says to her, What do you mean by that? Fine, you say what you want about me, but I've been working hard as a criminal transfer student, and I've helped many students, so I don't want a second criminal transfer student with me. Yukibi looks at him annoyed, then tells him, well, now our path is different, and this makes it easier for the other to do their work. Aki says fine, that's good, see you later, and leaves her, and goes. Yukibi thinks and says the annoying one left. Now it's time to work on gathering the necessary information. Going back to the student's words that everyone has this candy. There are many students using these drugs. I want to know to what extent it's been provided in this school. I'll bring the students and ask them to confess about the source that provides these drugs in the school. I can handle that alone because I'm a criminal transfer student. Then Yukibi looks inside the classroom and is shocked when she sees that all the students are under the influence of drugs. Even Aki is under the influence of drugs. Yukibi is shocked when she sees that all the class students are under the influence of drugs. Even Aki, who acts exactly like their behavior. And one of the students asks him with a smile, "Who are you?" Aki told him, "I'm Aki." Yukibi pulls him to her and says to him, "What are you doing?" Aki says to her, "What? You agreed with me that each of us is on a different path in this mission. Didn't you find your way?" She says to him, "Impossible. Did you taste this candy?" Aki told her, "No, I didn't." Yukibi tells him, "Then why are you acting like them and moving like them, as they do?" At this time, a student comes and says, "I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation, but who are you? And from which class?" Aki and Yukibi look at him in surprise. Another student comes and tells him they're transfer students who just moved here. The student who was asking says, "Transfer students. I understand. Welcome with us." And the rest of the students welcome them again. And the student says, "Welcome to the school's drug lovers club." Aki is surprised and Yukibi looks with anger. And Aki says nervously, "Drug lovers club." The student says, "That's right. This group uses drugs so we can be happy together. And this is our teacher, Professor Tamura. And we see that even the teacher is taking drugs." Yukibi says, "I knew it. This school is drowning in drugs." The student says, yes, that's right, everyone thinks that in the first place." Then the student cries. Both Yukibi and Aki are surprised. And Aki says to him, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" The student says, and wipes his tears. Yes, these drugs are terrifying. I used to think that too, but they're fine. For example, coke was unacceptable at first. Everything is scary at first. And he continues that Yakushi's drugs make us free from everything that worries us and make us fly high. Suddenly, this student receives a strong kick from Yukibi's foot, and she throws him away from her. And Yukibi tells him, "You're not free, but you only feel that you're free, even if you escape from reality." Then Yukibi remembers her mother. Then continues, "All this is just deception and illusion, and nothing will change." And we see Yukibi standing next to Aki, and in front of her, the student is lying on the ground, and the rest of the students are looking at them. Then Yukibi asks them, "So where can I find this Yakushi?" The students stand shocked. Then a student says, "Let's kill them. These demons want to drop us from heaven." Aki prepares to fight them and says, "If anyone approaches, I'll teach him a lesson. I'm very strong in case you don't know." Suddenly Yukibi runs at them and hits each one of them. And Aki was amazed by her speed and strength and agility and movement, and says, "Who is this girl really? She's extremely strong." Then she stands in front of a student, and he was afraid of her. And she said to him, "Why don't you guide us to the place of Yakushi, who brings you these drugs?" The student, who is wounded and afraid of her, says, Okay, I'll guide you to him, but don't hit me again." Then we see Aki and Yukibi walking behind the student, and Aki says to her, "You showed great strength a while ago." Yukibi told him, "You also learned fighting skills in training. Isn't that right?" Aki says to her, "Did I do that?" Then they arrive at the door of Yakushi's office, and the student says this is his office. Yukibi is surprised. Aki opens the door and says, "Excuse us, is Yakushi here?" They hear someone saying, "It's genius. It's beautiful. I can't help it, but I'm very excited about my genius." And we see that Yakushi is the school doctor. Then he looks at Aki and Yukibi and says to them, "Who are you? Do you need something from me?" Aki whispers in Yukibi's ear and says, "This is Yakushi. He's definitely a bad person." Yukibi is surprised and says, "Wait, you must be joking with me. Are you making drugs in the school?" Yakushi says this area is supposed to be prohibited. "Who are you really?" Aki says, "I'm Aki, a criminal transfer student. Pleased to meet you." Yukibi gets angry at Aki and says, "You idiot, can't you be careful?" Yakushi says, "And what does this mean?" Suddenly his facial features change and he becomes excited and says, "This is something interesting. You will probably become the second genius for me." And he introduces himself, "I'm Yakushi." I'm the genius. Welcome, pleased to meet you. Aki says us too. Yukibi is annoyed and says I can't understand, but he seems like a fool, and his help is not useful. Yakushi continues his talk and asks them, what do you want from the genius? Yukibi tells him, Yakushi, I heard a rumor that you make drugs here. Is this true? Yakushi is silent, then says, I understand. You want to taste Yakushi's genius products. Taste the devil pill. Aki is surprised and says the devil, and Yakushi extends his hand with a piece of candy to give it to them, and says, this is the devil. What do you think? Isn't it beautiful? Taste it, and you'll become geniuses. Yukibi says this candy is the same type of candy that the student in class gave me. Yukibi asks him, so, this devil, did you make it? Because I think you're the one who made it. Yakushi says, yes, correct, I'm the one who made it, because I'm a genius. And look now, this is the drug I made with my genius. Yukibi says, wow, this is drugs, it's amazing. Yakushi says indeed, and continues, and says, if you took this, you will. Suddenly Yukibi delivers a strong blow to these drugs, and makes them scatter on the ground, and here Yakushi screams, and says, what have you done? This is bad, this is bad. Then he laughs insanely. Aki is shocked by his laugh. Yukibi wonders, what makes you laugh? Do you know how many people's health was destroyed because of this person? And Yakushi laughs, then says, I didn't do that. And Aki and Yukibi look at him, and Yakushi continues, I didn't do that because I wanted to do that. Aki looks at him with interest, and Yukibi asks him, what do you mean by your words? Yakushi says, I mean I wanted to make some money, and when I made these drugs I got a lot of money. At first I started selling drugs to the bad students at school, then I spread them among the students, until they became distributed all over the school. Even the teachers were coming to me to take the devil pill. Even the rumors spread outside the school, and the drugs started spreading in the underworld. Until one day came, and we see a person carrying a weapon. Then we see 3 people pointing their weapon in Yakushi's face. A group of Chinese mafia came to me when they heard about my drugs. Then they ordered me that they will come to me once every month to collect the devil pill from me in abundant quantities. Then we see Yakushi telling Aki and Yukibi that he can't go back from this path. Yukibi looks at him in silence. Aki asks him, are these people strong? Yakushi tells him they have weapons and we can't fight them, and that if I fail to deliver the drugs to them, I'll be finished. Yukibi asks him, when is the delivery? Yakushi says it's today at exactly 7 o'clock. Yukibi is surprised and says 7 o'clock, this means that. Then she looks at the clock and sees it's 7 o'clock and 8 minutes. Aki says it's now. Then we see a group of men entering the school with bags, and we see people carrying weapons. 3 men appear entering the school. Yakushi panics and becomes terrified, then screams and runs away. Aki calls out to him. Suddenly the 3 men appear in front of Yakushi. Yakushi says to them, I was running from a small problem. Can you give me a moment? Suddenly the bald man delivers a powerful punch to Yakushi's face, then grabs him by his hair and says, you will come with us. Aki and Yukibi appear behind them and say, wait. Yukibi says, you two are dealers, aren't you? I want you to take me to your location. Yakushi says, while in pain, take those 2 together. The bald man says to the other 2 men, go and make them quiet. And they carry out his order and head toward Aki and Yukibi. Aki says to Yukibi, don't drag me into trouble. Yukibi replies, this is my line. One of them attacks Aki, but Aki delivers a powerful and fast punch to his face, then pulls him close and drops him to the ground with a judo move. Then the other person appears and raises his leg to kick Aki. But suddenly, Yukibi appears and kicks his leg, and Aki stands up and punches him in the face and drops him to the ground. And Aki says, this is my strength. Then Yukibi says to him, do you remember who you owe? At this moment, Aki hears a gunshot and looks at Yukibi and notices that the bullet grazed her face. Then we see that the bald man is the one who fired this shot at Yukibi. Yukibi holds her face, which was injured by the bullet fragment, and says to the bald man, it's very dangerous to point that at a lady. Then we see Yukibi remove her skirt belt. Aki screams and says, I felt shocked when you were shot at. Then Yukibi holds the belt in her hands. The bald man laughs and says to her, with this thing you will defeat the gun. Then Yukibi suddenly and quickly strikes with the belt at the bald man and hits his hand, and the gun flies from his hand. Then she pulls the bald man toward her and delivers a powerful blow with her knee to his face. Then the bald man bleeds and falls to the ground. Then Yukibi stands and says, men are so naive, because they judge things by appearance only. Aki says, that's beautiful, can I use this belt? Yukibi replies, no. Then Aki is surprised and asks, where did Yakushi and the man wearing black go? The scene changes, and we see a ship at a port, and Yakushi screams while tied to a chair and says, help, I'm scared. The person wearing black puts the gun in his mouth and says to him, shut up, if you speak again I will kill you. Then calls out and says, boss, what should we do? Then we see a person standing looking at the sea, then says, take this person with you and return, we will monopolize the demon. Then turns to Yakushi and says to him, If you give us the secret of your invention, we will compensate you for that, so rest assured. Then the boss's face appears and says to him the relationship between us is equal. Suddenly, a car arrives during their conversation. Then Aki and Yukibi get out and Aki says, while smiling, "Hello, Yakushi." Yakushi screams and says, "You two again." Then the bald man appears and says, "This is the place, please untie me." Then Yukibi punches him in the face and says to him, "Thank you for accompanying us." Then says, "First everyone here needs to be punished," and holds her belt in her hands, then sees something that shocks her. The boss says, "This then," the familiar face. Aki says, "Who are you?" Then looks at Yukibi and says, "What's wrong with you?" The boss says, "I'm happy to see you again, Yukibi." And Yukibi stands frozen in place and sweats from fear. Then we go back in memories. When Yukibi was 6 years old, it was Christmas Day, and we see a lady saying, "Wait here, Yukibi." And 6-year-old Yukibi appears and says, "Okay, mom." And Yukibi says she saw her mother running away. And anyone understands now that I was abandoned, and I sat in the street alone crying. Then a person appears and says to me, "You're alone, come with me, I will buy you toys." Little Yukibi says to him, "I hate you." The man says to her, "Why, I want to take you with me, and I want to play with you." Then little Yukibi panics, and suddenly a lady comes and kicks this man, and Yukibi is surprised. The lady says to the man fallen on the ground, "Go now unless you want me to smash your head." Then the man gets up and runs away. The lady looks at Yukibi and says to her, "Don't walk alone in the streets. At night, where are your parents?" Yukibi looks sadly and says to her, "It seems they won't come." The lady looks at her and says, "I understand. What do you think about coming with me to my house?" Yukibi looks at her in amazement. Then the lady takes her by the hand and says to her, "Come with me," and Yukibi walks with her, and in the lady's house. The lady says, "This is my house." And we see a group of children inside. They say, "Merry Christmas." And another child says, "Welcome back." And another child says, "Clara, I'm hungry." The lady called Clara says, Okay, I will prepare food. What do you think about fried chicken pieces and cake pieces?" Then looks at Yukibi and says to her, "Why are you standing alone? Join us." And little Yukibi wonders, who is this woman? And Clara prepares food for the children, and the children are happy with what Clara prepared. Then they sit together at the dinner table, and each child starts eating, and Clara says to one of the children called Shinji, "I told you to be careful when you use the stick." Then directs her words to Yukibi, and says to her, You must be hungry. Don't be shy, start eating." Yukibi looks at the food while tearing up, then starts eating it, and she was eating quickly. Clara laughs here and says to her, "Take it easy, the food won't run away." One of the children says, "Clara, will this child live with us?" Clara replies to him if she says yes. Yukibi is surprised and says, "We all live together." "What does that mean?" Clara says, while laughing. "Don't you want to be part of our family?" Yukibi is surprised and says, "Family." Then we hear Clara saying, "Everyone brush their teeth." And the children reply, "Yes." Clara says, "Then go to sleep now." Then we see the children spreading mattresses on the floor and sleeping next to each other, and Yukibi sits alone. Then a girl comes and says to her, "Yukibi, my name is Mio, I'm the oldest here. If you need anything, don't be shy and ask me." Yukibi says she brought me here too. One of the children interrupts her and says, "We're all like that. We are, yes, a family, but there's no blood relation between us." Yukibi says that means Clara. One of the children interrupts her and says Clara takes homeless children and makes them live with her as a family. "Don't you want to become a member of this family, Yukibi?" Yukibi replies and says it's early. One of the children laughs and says Clara is very kind and takes good care of us. Then Clara enters and says to them, "Why are you making noise? It's bedtime." One of the children replies and says, "Okay, we will sleep now." Then Clara leaves the room and says to them, "Good night," and turns off the lights and closes the door. And at night we see all the children sleeping next to each other, but Yukibi can't sleep. At this time Clara enters and checks that everyone is asleep, then notices that Yukibi is not asleep and pretending to sleep. She goes to her and smiles and hugs her and says to her, "Don't worry, sleep well," then leaves the room. Yukibi remembers her mother when she used to abuse her, and notices that Clara is completely different from her mother, then cries. Then in another place, we see Clara being beaten by someone, and Clara falls to the ground and bleeds from her face, and we see this person approaching her and saying, "You're late, Clara." Clara apologizes to him and says the children don't fall asleep easily. The person says, "I took the liberty of punching you because of your delay, and now let's work." And we see that this is the same boss person who was on the port that Yukibi saw and was scared of him. Then the boss continues speaking and says, while smiling to Clara, "Please let's start working." Then a year passes, and we see Yukibi has gotten used to living with Clara and the rest of the children. and Yukibi has become responsible for household affairs when Clara is away from home. Then Clara returns home, and Yukibi welcomes her and tells her lunch is ready. Then Clara responds, "Then let's eat together." A child says she fought with Yuto over a toy, but Yuto tells her they made up because Yukibi intervened between them and fixed things. One of the children says Yukibi has become like a big sister to us. Clara puts her hand on Yukibi's head and says, "Then when I'm away, the family is safe." Then Clara tells her, "Yukibi, if anything happens, I'm counting on you to take care of the family." Yukibi looks at her happily and says okay. Then one of the children says, "Why didn't you leave the broccoli?" Yukibi replies, "Because I hate broccoli." Then the children joke around with Yukibi. Then it becomes 8:30, and Clara says, "You must sleep at exactly 9. A child says, "Okay, good night." One of the children says Christmas is coming soon. Another child hopes to get gifts. Yukibi is surprised and says gifts. A child says to Yukibi, "Haven't you gotten gifts before?" Yukibi responds, "No." A child says, "This year you'll get gifts. Do you want anything specific?" Yukibi says she wants clothes. The rest of the children say, "Let's go shopping and buy clothes." A girl says, "Speaking of this, Yukibi came to us last Christmas." Yukibi says, "Yes. At that time Clara brought me here." The girl says, "Me too. I was the first child here." And she wonders why Clara brought us here. A child responds, "We never asked that question." Yukibi says to herself, "Really? Why did Clara bring us here?" In the next scene, we see Clara sitting upset and looking sad. In front of her are papers and financial calculations of amounts of money that seem to be decreasing. And Clara says, "What should I do?" Then the scene changes, and Clara says, "Well, this should last 3 days. Thank you, Yukibi, for helping me shop." Then Yukibi looks at her and says, "Clara, I want to ask you a question." Clara looks at her and says, "Go ahead." Yukibi says, "Why did you take me to your home and care for me? And why do you help all of us?" Clara looks at her and says, "Because I was like you once. I was abandoned as a small child and thrown into the street without shelter, and I didn't know what to do or where to go, and I was harassed a lot, and I started asking, why am I alive, and what's the purpose for me to live for? I didn't know anything. That's why I decided to become a mother to any homeless child, and to be a family, and I established this family, our family." Yukibi holds her hands and says, "Does that mean we are Clara's reason for living?" Clara hugs her and says, "Yes, you are," and Yukibi smiles at her, but suddenly they hear someone say, "Oh, what a coincidence," and the person appears from behind Clara. It's the boss. Clara turns to him in panic. Yukibi asks, "Is this someone who knows you, Clara?" The boss looks at her with a smile and says to Yukibi, "Hello, nice to meet you. I'm called Ryo, Clara's work colleague. This is perfect timing. I wanted to discuss work with you, Clara." Clara looks at Yukibi and says, "Yukibi, go home." Yukibi says, "Okay." Ryo signals to her with an evil smile and says, "Be careful." Ryo says to Clara, "Did you finish the work last night?" Clara says yes. Ryo says, "Well done," and tells her, "I noticed the number of children has increased. You're spending a lot of money now." Clara responds hesitantly, "Yes." Ryo replies, "That's reassuring." Then he says, "This girl I saw, she's stunning. I think she'll be beautiful when she grows up. I'm sure she'll earn a lot in the future." Suddenly, Clara attacks him and says, "You bastard. If you touch Yukibi, I'll kill you." Ryo looks at her with an evil look and says, "Let go of me." Suddenly Clara wakes from her anger and says, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I did." Ryo says, "Don't worry. I always take care of my business partners, and as long as you don't mess with these children, I won't report you. I'm going to China tomorrow and I'll spend about a week there. I'll be back by the new year." Clara says in panic, "A week? The warehouse is your responsibility now until I return." And Ryo leaves. In the next scene, Clara says, "What will I do during the week?" Yukibi enters and says, "Clara." Clara is surprised and says, "Aren't you asleep, Yukibi?" Yukibi says, "Yes, I want to use the bathroom." "What are you doing, Clara?" Clara responds, "I'm planning a trip for us," and asks Yukibi, "Do you know the Alps?" Yukibi says, "The Alps mountain range in Europe?" Clara says, "Yes, that's it," and points to a picture and says, "This picture is from there." And Clara continues her words and says, "My dream is that we all go there and live together as a family," and asks Yukibi, "Do you want to go there?" Yukibi says, "Yes, I'd love that. I want to be with Clara forever." Clara hugs Yukibi and says, "Thank you," and continues, "Come on, go to bed to sleep." Yukibi says to her, "Okay, will you come home early tomorrow?" Clara responds, "Tomorrow is a busy day. I have a lot of work, but I'll try to come early." Yukibi says to her, "Okay, Clara, good night." And at night, Clara goes to the warehouse and says, he won't come until after a week, and he might be delayed until the beginning of the new year. And here we see the safe full of money, and we see Clara taking a lot of money and putting it in a large bag. And Clara says, "I'll go home early and attend the Christmas party." and I'll buy Yukibi a new dress, and we'll all go to the Alps. Just as I planned, a week should be enough to execute my plan. Soon I'll be free. Then Clara goes home, and is surprised when she enters the house and sees the children surprise her with a Christmas party. And they say to her, "Merry Christmas, Clara." And Yukibi says, "Welcome back, Clara." And the children seem happy that Clara came for Christmas. But Clara stands frozen in place, and says, "Why?" And suddenly we see the boss standing in front of her and saying to her with an evil smile, "Welcome back, Clara." Clara is still shocked and standing in her place. Rio says, "As you can see, Clara, my work in China was cancelled, and since it's a happy night, I decided to come and surprise you with the boys." A girl says, "This is Clara's boss at work." And another child says, "He said, let's surprise Clara together." Rio says, "Your face looks very pale. Did something happen? And more importantly, are our drugs sold out completely?" Yukibi is shocked and says, "Drugs?" and looks at Clara, who tilts her head down in sadness and feels ashamed. And Yukibi continues her words to Clara, and says to her, "What does he mean by his words?" Rio says, "Let me explain to you, little one." Clara yells at him and says, "Shut up." But Rio continues his words and says, "Clara's job is selling drugs that I import from abroad." Yukibi is shocked, and the rest of the children look sad, and a child says, "I heard on TV that drugs are bad and illegal work." Clara stands in front of them, silent and sweating, and the children come to her and say to her, "Is this true? Tell us he's lying." And a child says, "It's impossible. Clara would do something bad." Rio laughs and says, "As long as you think that, why doesn't Clara speak and deny her boss?" And the child yells at Clara and says, "He's lying, Clara. Talk to me." And Rio says, "And now we come to the most important topic. What's the content of this bag you have with you?" "This is from my warehouse safe, isn't it?" Clara is silent and remains still. Rio says, "Silence means confirmation. The thing I hate most in life is when you treat someone well and they respond to you with harm. Where's the justice in that? But for justice to be achieved, you must receive punishment. And for your sake, I'll give you an offer. What about the lives of the people here?" Here Clara screams and says, "Impossible. Don't you dare come near them." Rio says to her, "You have no choice. But on the occasion of this happy night, I'll make choices available." Then he pulls out a knife and throws it on the ground, and the children panic. And he directs his words to the children and says, "Kill Clara. If you do that, I'll let you live." Yukibi panics and says, "Kill her?" Then a child comes and says, "You're joking with us. Even if Clara sells drugs, Clara is the one who brought us together here, and we won't abandon her." Suddenly Rio delivers a strong blow to the child's face. The rest of the children are shocked, and Clara says no, and attacks Rio, but he grabs her by the face and drops her to the ground, and says, "I won't show mercy because you're a woman, or even because you're children. To me, humans are equal. If you waste more time, the victims will increase." A child says, "We'll call the police." Rio says, "Call the police. Go ahead, but Clara will also be arrested." Yukibi is shocked and says to herself, she must be dreaming a nightmare. We're all going to die. Then she remembers Clara's words to her when she told her to take care of the family. Then she looks at the knife and says, "That's right. I must protect my family." Then she approaches Clara and stabs her with the knife in her stomach. Here the rest of the children scream and say, "What have you done?" Yukibi says while crying, "If I didn't do this, we'd all die." And she plunges the knife deeper inside Clara. Clara falls to the ground, and Yukibi cries. Then Clara hugs her and says, "It's okay. I'm sorry for putting all this on you." Then she puts her hand on her head. Then she falls to the ground dead. Here Yukibi screams. Rio smiles and applauds her, and says to her, "Merry Christmas, Yukibi. Anyway, since Clara is dead, I need someone else to help me. Will you accept working for me?" And here Yukibi dreams. She's with Clara and the rest of the children in the Alps living together happily. But all of that is a dream, and she wakes up from it to the sound of the police. And two policemen say, "Is there any evidence that leads us to the suspect?" The other says, "Not yet." Then one of the policemen wonders why someone would take this amount of drugs, and we see Yukibi lying on the ground. Then we return to the present time. At the port, we see Rio standing and smiling and saying, "I'm happy that you've returned, Yukibi. What do you think about coming back so we can work together again? Come to me. Come with me." Then we see Yukibi approaching him and saying yes. Aki grabs her by the arm and says to her, "Where are you going?" And Yukibi looks at him in shock. Yukibi frees her arm from Aki's hand and says to him, "Leave me." Rio asks her, "Is this your friend, Yukibi?" She replies and says, "No." Rio replies, "Then let's get rid of him." Yukibi says to him, "Yes, Yoshiki." She says, "Take him with us. Anyone help me." Aki runs toward them and says, "Wait." But Yukibi strikes him with her belt, and Aki says to her, "Why did you do that?" Yukibi says to him, "If you come one step closer, I will kill you. Don't come forward." Aki says, "No. Why should I listen to every word you say?" Then we see Yukibi hit him again, and Aki says, "How long is this belt?" And he quickly grabs the belt and says to her, "I won't let you go, Yukibi." Yukibi is shocked, but Yukibi attacks him and delivers a strong blow, and Aki is in pain. Yukibi says, I was always angry with you. You always do what you want to do. And she hits Aki hard and continues her words, you don't listen to anyone. And Aki falls to the ground severely injured. She looks at him and says to him, goodbye, Aki. Then she turns and leaves. Then she hears Aki's voice getting up. She turns around surprised that Aki is standing on his feet in front of her, and he moves toward her and extends his hand to her. Yukibi says to him, I told you that you're annoying, and she hits him again and says to him, you don't want to understand until you die. And Aki falls to the ground, and Yukibi walks and leaves him, but Aki extends his hand and grabs her foot. She turns to him and says to him, why? Why are you stubborn? I don't understand. After all these wounds and beatings, why don't you stop trying to let me go? I'm completely a stranger to you, so leave me alone. Aki says, you've become a criminal transfer student now. I will tell you why I became a criminal transfer student. Yukibi looks at him with interest and shock. Aki says, when I was young, I killed many people, and I didn't know that was a wrong thing. But after that, I met Fuyumi, and I realized from her that everything I did was wrong, and I remembered everything I did wrong. I can't erase it, but I believe that I can change for the better and do what's right. I'm not like you, but in fact, you've become a criminal transfer student, and that means there's a chance for you to change for the better. Don't you want to change and become better than what you were before? Yukibi looks at him in silence. Then she says to him sadly, I want to change, but I'm afraid. If I face him, something terrible might happen. I don't want to lose everything again. I can't bear that. Then she falls on her knees and cries. But Aki says there's a solution. Yukibi looks at him in shock. Aki says, smiling, I will eliminate that bastard, and that solves everything. I'm a genius. Yukibi says to him, no, don't do something stupid. He's not the type you can defeat. Aki says to her, shut up. I told you before I don't listen to anyone. But then he puts his hand on her head and says to her, trust me, and shut up and wait. Then he runs toward Rio. Then Yukibi remembers Clara and the rest of the children. Then Yukibi runs after him. Rio stands facing the sea. Then he turns and sees that Aki has gotten rid of Rio's men. Rio says, well, it seems the little rat is looking for trouble. Aki looks at him with an evil look.